Good morning. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Paul Matthews. I'm the Professional Development Lead for the Police Federation. And today I'll be hosting a seminar, professional development seminar, which we've called Exchanging Currency. It's all about how you might turn your existing skills and training into qualifications and accreditation. I'll start by saying that you don't need a degree in policing, but with all the training and all the work that you do, I think you deserve one. And so today we're going to look at all the options that might be available to you. It builds on a seminar that we did earlier this year, which we called Masters in Investigation. If you have a chat bar on your screen, a link to that seminar will drop into that for you. If not, you can Google it. Just type in Masters of Investigation, PFEW. You'll either get the seminar or you get something about He-Man. You never know. If you have any questions, I would ask that you put them in the chat bar. We have a panel discussion after the speakers are finished, where your questions will be put to the speakers. If you, like I said before, if you don't have a chat bar, you can email your questions to events@polfed.org. That's events@polfed.org. Before I pass you over to, I'll quickly go through the agenda for today. Once I finish speaking, I'm going to pass you over to Sir Andy Marsh, who's CEO from the College of Policing. He's going to talk about what the College of Policing can offer you with the latest things that are coming out of the college. After that, we have Professor John Coxhead from Loughborough University. He's going to talk about the theme of the day, exchanging currency, the different types of learning and what could be made available to you and why it's important that you take up that training. We will then have a panel discussion where I'll be joined by Jim Hollyoak, who's sat next to me now, from Staffordshire University. We'll take any questions that you have. We have a hard stop at 11:20 where we'll take a break for 15 minutes. After that, we'll come back and we've got Karen Morton from the College of Policing. She's going to talk about the bursary available at the college, different funding options that might be available to pay for any qualifications or degrees that you might want to do, and how to make those applications. After that, we have Rob Lovesey from Serve and Protect Credit Union. Rob has at Serve and Protect put together an educational loan, a discounted loan for officers that don't manage to get any bursary or funding from their forces. So it's quite a competitive rate, and he's going to talk to you about that. We then break for lunch for an hour, back at 1:30, and we have three lecturers from three different universities. We've got Jim Hollyoak from Staffordshire University. He's going to talk about the flexibility of higher education and how the university can come to you, and there's no need for you to go to the university to do your studying. After that, we have Professor Gary Shaw from Sunderland University. He's going to talk about the importance of continued professional development through your career. And after that, we have Dr. Sean Bell from the Open University, who's going to talk about the importance of getting qualifications when you leave the job. They're also going to talk about the various qualifications and courses that are available for police officers at the end of their presentations. And again, after that, we'll have a Q&A session for any questions that you might have. So like I said before, any questions, please drop them in the chat bar. Dave Bamber, who used to do my role before me, he's going to host the panel session afterwards and put those questions to us. So that's enough from me. I'm now going to pass you over to the CEO from the College of Policing, Chief Constable Sir Andy Marsh.
Thanks very much, Paul. And first of all, what I want to say is a big thank you to the Police Federation of England and Wales for inviting me to Leatherhead here to take part in what I think is a hopefully really useful but important morning seminar. Thank you to Paul, who not only leading for professional development in the Federation, an important role is an active member of the board of the College of Policing. So he brings your wishes and your needs to bear on the board. And whilst I'm with my thanks, I should say thank you to Dave Bamber, who did that, fulfilled that role admirably before Paul, and it's good to see him. I'm going to give you a little bit of front loading about, I think, where we are with accreditation and where I'd like to take us. I'm going to use some slides. Hopefully you can see these. First of all, just want to say what the new mission of your College of Policing. I think that's an important word, your College of Policing. That's what we aspire to be seen as. And we're here to drive performance, deliver leadership and set standards. Three simple things that if we do well, will make us relevant to you, your needs, your job, your profession. We need to be dynamic. We need to keep up with you. Policing is a fast moving profession. And then most of all, and it's particularly why I'm pleased to be with you today, we need to connect with you. So look, moving through these slides, why is accreditation important? you can see some bullets up there why I think it's important. What I'd like to draw your attention to is particularly the issue of attraction and retention. We compete for the best possible people that we want to attract into policing, and we need to keep them in policing. We certainly won't do that unless we look after them, unless we develop them, unless we care for them. And actually part of that is their professional development. That's what other professions and careers will offer the best people. I also think that it's linked to pay. With all of the debate about whether policing is a level 6 or a degree occupation, let me be clear about two things I think are important. One is I want the best possible training and preparation for the members that you represent and for you. And I do think it's linked to pay. We compete with other professions in pay, and if people can see that we're accredited, I think that helps in the negotiations. It's no, there are other benefits, you can see them here. It's no secret, and you'll see it in public survey work, that 5 of the most trusted professions in England and Wales are actually ones where there is a license to practice, and I'll talk about what that might mean in a moment. So I'm going to click through these slides. I've got to be patient to make sure that I don't double click. There does seem to be a little bit of a delay. Maybe it'll come up in a minute. It's going to go twice, I reckon. Accreditation in policing. Right. Accreditation can be under the remit and auspices of the higher educational sector. You're going to hear a lot about that today. But for me, accreditation, it is about that, but it's also about the sort of accreditation we offer from within. There are over 200 specializations within policing. I hope that many of you online will have been to Wrighton to receive some training and maybe even accreditation. I think that's one of the reasons why we call it a job like no other. The job is that if we stimulate, prompt and test ourselves, we can keep moving through different fields rather than moving jobs. It is a job that I would like to see people stay within. So which of those 200 roles do you think, and it's a rhetorical question, obviously, because we're not interacting with each other right now, looking forward to the Q&A, which is the area of policing which is most developed around accreditation? Well, I'll tell you what I think, probably armed policing. You'll know some of these facts, that in the year ending in March 2023, there were over 18,000 incidents the police attended. Only 10 of those were the weapons discharges, and there were 3 deaths, each and every one incredibly serious. But the previous years, the number of discharges was 4, 4 and 5. So a tiny number of cases where weapons were actually discharged, and it reflects the pinpoint of the use of force within policing in England and Wales, which is globally marvelled at, to be honest with you, because of the great skill, expertise and restraint of our brilliant authorised firearms officers. Now, this doesn't happen by accident. There's a code of practice for the police use of firearms. These are products overseen by your College of Policing. 2003, it was published initially, refreshed in 2020. There's an authorised professional practice on armed policing. There's a national firearms curriculum that underpins it. There are over 100 accredited ranges within England and Wales, and you don't get to do firearms training at a range unless it's accredited. And there are career pathways in a leadership level and on the ground, from AFOs, ARVs, TAC advisors, specialities such as rifle officers. And then actually at the command level, there's tactical, operational, strategic. At what cost is this? Well, it's 147 hours per year training for an AFO. The abstraction time is £3,800 a year. A fair price to pay? I think so. Response officers, how much time do you think a response officer gets for mandated CPD per year? Well, it's 27 hours. I don't think it's enough. I talk about the sort of complexity that you and your colleagues face on the ground, the ambiguity, the risk, the accountability you face. You should be getting world-class training, and with that training, I think can come accreditation. More and more. Not only can, it should. And there is a battle in policing between CPD being seen as an investment in our workforce or an abstraction. I know which one I think it is. So what's my view about it at the college? Well, I think we are on a journey towards a license to practice. I think that, as I've said, the most trusted professions do have some form of licensing that gives their members confidence that they're able to fulfill the role, and it gives the public that they serve confidence, or the customers they serve confidence that they know that the person they're dealing with has got those skills and preparation. And if you look at other professions, and I'm sure you do, and I won't name them, but where there are outrages in terms of malpractice or poor behaviour, how is it that those professions escape the ongoing widespread scorn and criticism that policing gets when we experience similar poor behaviour? I think it is because they have got a trusted, visible, transparent accountability mechanism for managing the professionalism in their service. So this is the way in which I'm looking to rise the tide of professionalism, and we're making progress year by year. And some progress was made, which was announced yesterday, the Neighbourhood Placing career pathway. Now, there's a school of thought where there's no better learning than experienced on the ground. And adult learning is best delivered through a combination of interactive and engaging learning and training, but also experience on the ground. But how many years would it take a beat manager to become fully experienced in all of the tactics, options, and approaches to dealing with problem solving, antisocial behaviour and community engagement? How much more quickly can we accelerate that through just the right amount of CPD? So I'm pleased to say that this has been launched, and I'm pleased to say there's 11 pilot forces that are engaging with it. I anticipate once we've learned from those pilots, it will be rolled out across the whole of policing from next April. Let's pick another area. And I said I wanted your College of Policing to be relevant. You can't really get many more relevant areas than violence against women and girls, where the government has announced their intention to cut this criminality by a half. Leading up to April of this year, it was quite possible that if you were in the unfortunate circumstances of being a victim of rape or serious sexual offences, you may well have your case managed by, however well-intentioned, a constable or detective who had no training or preparation in dealing with rape or sexual offences. Now, compare that to the police use of firearms, public order, undercover policing. I think that is a real problem. I'm pleased to say that we've rolled out RISDIP, as it's known, training to 4,500 officers across England and Wales, and that will be replaced in the very near future by an accredited course licensed by the College of Policing for rape investigation. We intend, with the support of policing and the government, in the near future to create a national centre for public protection, and other accredited courses will include heads of professional standards, heads of public protection, but also a PIP 1. And you think about professionalising investigations training, PIP 1 to 4, which again, many countries across the world envy that detective training. And you think about our performance around murder investigation is fantastic. We've got problems with volume crime investigation. So we will be introducing a licensed PIP 1 supervisors course. That's coming to a police force near you very soon. And that recognises that many of our sergeants on the front line that are overseeing volume crime investigation simply have not had the training or experience to oversee volume crime investigations. The next slide is about leadership. I'm just wondering if it's going to come up. I'll press it again at my risk. There we go. Everyone in policing is a leader. We are developing through the National Centre for Police Leadership and Training, which is licensed at every level. Because we know that leadership training has been eroded through years of austerity, I think to the detriment of the service, we are looking to link professional training and development to promotion at every level. And you'll probably be aware that the sergeants and inspectors promotion processes are being reformed at the moment. So what about this idea of a license to practice then? The public and you will be familiar with it in the medical profession, legal, teaching, nursing, and paramedics. I think it can, and delivered in just the right way, play a role reassuring the public, ensuring that continuous professional development is taken seriously by leaders at every level, including chief constables, and not the thing that gets abandoned or paid lip service to when the pressures come on. That's just a time when you should be applying a little bit more discipline to your professional development. What could be in the ingredients for a license to practice? It wouldn't, in my opinion, place an unreasonable burden upon policing, but it could include, for example, investigation standards, the need to be vetted, the need to be trained in police public safety training, something around violence against women and girls, upstanding order, code of ethics. These are all things that we would want to debate with the Police Federation and other partners. You can hear a lot about external accreditation and independent study, and I look forward to you hearing from Karen Morton from your college later about bursaries and recognition of higher educational training, which I'll be frank with you, I wish I'd taken personally a little bit more seriously earlier in my career. I was too ready to make excuses about why I was too busy to do it. Here's an asset. We've got the National Police Library. I think Karen will tell you a bit about that, so we'll cut through that. If you're wondering what is being researched, if you're moving through your study into, let's say, a master's or even further, the college hosts something called a research map. I don't think that there is sufficient research into what works in policing. I think for a profession that should be world-class at understanding and using evidence, we are too often dismissive of it. We'll perhaps talk about the reasons why later. You'll see on the college website a crime reduction toolkit. This is from approaches that have been researched, where the research says the degree to which they can be trusted to be replicated. When I came into the college, I committed us to be relevant, dynamic, and connected. And one of the drawbacks of research, it does take months, sometimes years, to fully evaluate. And in order to tackle the things that matter most to policing, we need to find a more dynamic way to get you information about what works. And so we introduced something called the Practice Bank in 2023. It picks up good practice identified by His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, but it also picks up good practice identified through Tilly Problem Solving Awards, or indeed, if you're watching this now and you think they haven't got some good practice about this problem, I would like to put it forward to be put on the college website. I would encourage you to do that. It's a really light touch approach, and we're looking for practice which is innovative or promising. You can have a look at that on the website to get a flavour of what's on there, but here's a little grid that tells you about some of the things that are on there amongst those 185. But I'd love to see your work reflected there. What do we do with this practice bank? We identify the issues of practice which are perhaps most relevant, most promising, and with the small amount of money that is available to the service to invest in further evaluation, we push it through smarter practice into fully what works. Lastly, let me see where I can just get it up, and then I will hand on a little quote there from this man, Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, I said to you that in terms of a personal regret around involving myself in this earlier in my career and feeling as though I was too busy. I've met lots of people that would use self-denying language, and I've used it myself. I can't do that now because actually I'm challenging you to think I could do that now if, and figure what the if is. And if you've got a leadership team and a boss, and I've already talked about leadership in this, that is really genuinely interested in your career, they should be encouraging you to find ways to stretch yourself, to develop your professionalism for all of the reasons that I started with right at the beginning of this presentation. So look, I'm looking forward to the Q&A session. Really value you joining us today, and thank you for your ongoing commitment to policing. We need the very best people in policing right now and in the future.
Thanks for that, Andy. Apologise if you can hear any background noise. We've got a hostage and negotiators course running next door, and I think they've just started playing something on the TV. I don't know if it's been picked up by the microphones, but apologies if that's the case. We are trying to do things slightly different for this seminar. We've got several, have you seen, several different angles and cameras being used just to try and make things look a little bit more professional. But apologies about the noise in the background if you hear that, because that's quite unprofessional, but there we go. We're running a little ahead of time. Just check that we have John Coxhead online. Is he ready to join?
Good morning, Paul.
Thank you, John. I'll introduce John. John's a professor from Loughborough University. He's also a visiting professor at Staffordshire University and one of the, dare me say, one of the leading academics around the police education and training. So welcome, John. John's going to talk about the theme of today, exchanging currency. So over to you, John.
Thank you very much for the invite. That was a great presentation by Sir Andy Marsh. Sets the scene up well, I think. My motivation for being here is, as a retired cop, I'm really keen to help other cops and really keen to support the Federation, which I do regard as a kind of grassroots organisation who's there to look after members. They've certainly supported me in my service. So I thought on this particular topic of exchanging currency, the thing I might be able to add a little bit of value to is this notion of my work through what I do in external examining. So on that slide there, you can see I've put those analogies up to the border control and checking documentation, etc. Because we do live in this pass-fail world of access, and accreditation is part of that. So I brought my certificates with me. You can see on the screen there, I've put the little thing just to show I've got some paperwork. That background around external examining is that I do stuff with different universities, generally to do with policing, and the role of an external examiner is to look at learning descriptions, learning descriptors assessment, and technically oversee the notion of calibration. And calibration is something in policing people will be familiar with, for example, in the notion of how we calibrate speedometers to make sure that we've got a kind of parity and a standard to things, so we know that things equal other things. And I can talk about that more technical stuff later on if you wanted to, but I wanted to try and use that background as an external examiner in trying to help this topic. So Lisa, if you could put me slide 2 on. I think Lisa's controlling my slides. Thanks very much, Lisa. There. So the point of this is to try and give you a bit of a confidence booster. You'll have to let me know whether or not I pull that off, but I am here to try and tell police colleagues that you can do this stuff, and a lot of this is about exchanging currency and sometimes just kind of translating language. So slide 3, please, Lisa. So a little bit here about the notion of the importance of the benefits of the having learning accredited. So it gives you a form of credit, as it says, listed on the left-hand side of that table there, which you can read for yourself, about some of the potential benefits of having accredited learning. It does give you pathways. There is a structure. There is a quality assurance behind having things which have been accredited. There's a lot of background work that goes into accredited learning, actually, which I won't bore you with. And on the right-hand side of that slide, the National Qualifications Framework, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, is basically the way it works nationally in terms of how qualifications are structured. And these 8 levels I want to talk about a little bit more and show you that maybe they may appear irrelevant or you've not heard about them before, but they are highly relevant to policing. And I think the more we can connect the qualification structure to what we do in internal training and accredited work in policing, the more actually we can make fast progress. So put me on slide 4, please, Lisa. So on slide 4, what I've done here is I've used that national qualification framework, the one I've just shown you on that previous slide, those 8 levels, and I've taken out some of the key snippet buzzwords from how the learning descriptors are articulated. And it's interesting, I think, that the way the descriptors work is that they do describe, bear in mind these are all for, at the top end, they're all to do with degree programs, but they do start with school and what used to be O levels in my day and A levels, etc. But they all work all the way through, and so these would be included the things that you would think of being as academic, but they all tend to describe skills, things that you can do, things that are almost observable behaviours, and it's this balance between knowledge towards skills, which I call kind of knowledge and know-how, which in policing you do. And on that little list there, you can see where I've taken out some quotes. I know this is not interactive. I did try this exercise on Paul. Forgive me, Paul, for explaining this, but I did do this little exercise with Paul a few days ago. And we had a very interesting discussion about, I said to Paul, where do you think you are on this? And the more he thought about it, I'm sorry to do this, Paul, without asking you. The more he thought about it, the more actually he was moving up this table further and further, because if you look at the actual reality of the complexity and the dynamic accountability, it's a tough job, policing. And you start looking at that list and you start thinking, actually, I'm quite high up in that list. And it's quite an enlightening experience. And I see this as an external examiner all the time, thinking there's an element of unfairness here. We need to level this playing field. Policing is not recognised to the skill level that it does have. And interestingly, let me just give you another point in terms of a little analogy or metaphor here, is that we'll all be familiar with, say, general practitioners, GPs, medicine, other professions. Sir Andy Marsh made this point well earlier on. But if you think about the standing of the GP in the community, most doctors, as we call them, GPs, are actually qualified to level 7 on this list. Now, the level 7 is a master's degree program. Paul himself, I keep mentioning Paul, is actually on one of those master's programs overseen by Jim there. But the doctor title that doctors have in the main is just an honorary title. But the notion of the people working in the local police station to the local medical surgery, there is actually parity already in existence, in the sense that the qualifications levels are the same. It's just that the public may not see that, and the police don't necessarily get the value that they should have in terms of the level they're working at. What's missing is probably some of the accreditation and the paperwork. So these slides, I think, would be available to people after the event. I would suggest, even though we can't do it now, in an interactive fashion later in the day or at another time, if you can have a look at those descriptors, have a look through and honestly ask yourself, where do you think you sit? Because I think you'll be quite high. So I'm hoping that's a confidence boost just in itself. So could you give me slide 5 now, Lisa? So here, okay, it looks a little bit technical, but I'm just trying to give you some of the lingo and the language behind some of this stuff. We tend to have pathways and structures in the way higher education qualifications are awarded, and they use these titles RPL and APL. Now we've got accredited forms of prior learning, and we've got forms there which are certified learning, and they may be certified. The organisation may say, well, we've certified them internally, but that's not what APCL means. It means certified learning, which has been mapped against one of the learning descriptors at the national level, which is recognised in education. And we've also got the notion of APEL, which is accredited prior experiential learning. Experiential learning, posh sounding name. But when Sir Andy Marsh was talking about, you know, the notion of how long would it take to form all those skills and learning and insights to do problem solving in a neighbourhood role, etc. Experiential learning is that notion of learning on the job. Now, lots and lots of people in policing have lots of learning, lots of learning on the job, which isn't necessarily then mapped and accredited at the national levels on the NQF, the National Qualification Framework. Nevertheless, it exists. Now, the notion of RPLs and APLs, recognised prior learning and accredited prior learning, is the notion of how we can translate and exchange the currencies of what people can do or what they know, so they can be recognised, and then you allow some form of portability. In the top right corner of that slide, I've just taken a little snippet there from how the international market does this. So there are organisations, for example, based in Paris, which can move a person who's maybe studied in California, who can then translate their degree levels to what might be working in Kyoto in Japan or in Russia or South Africa. There are ways, because we've got these learning descriptors, where different countries may set different numbers to the levels, but we can still plug these in together and have a form of connection. Now, policing can do that as well. It's not that the skills and the knowledge isn't in policing, it's just that they're simply not mapped and linked in enough. And I think there are lots of benefits to that, because there are internal benefits to you that makes you feel better, more rewarded. It's got all sorts of opportunities to enhancing what we currently do around PDR, transfer of roles, and even the promotion process itself in terms of spotting talent. But also, it's a big boost to public confidence, because, as I say, even that little analogy that the police station is running with the same skills levels as the doctor's surgery, people don't necessarily see, but that is the reality. A little thing in the bottom right corner of that slide, that slide's not live, so you can't kind of click on it, but I noticed that the College of Policing have got something there which is really useful, which maybe more can be done with, but it gives you this credit estimator. So when Sir Andy Marsh was saying about, recognise some of these courses at writing, etc., the credit estimator gives you a list of courses that have been hosted nationally, and you can tick little boxes to say which ones have you attended, and it will then give you a score about what currency you've currently got, which can then be exchanged against the number of higher education providers. And I think the notion of elevating that sort of process, making it more standardized, making it more dynamic, making it more normal, and maybe even linking it into PDRs would be quite a straightforward step. I do think it is about exchanging currency. The thing about currency is you have to understand in the first place that you do have a currency in the first place, which can then be exchanged. And that's where I'm trying to emphasize. I think one of the key things here is for you to have the confidence that you do have knowledge and skills, and these are very, very considerable. There are lots of people out there, I think, just don't appreciate how complex policing is, and might not do a very good job of it. So Lisa, could you give me the next slide, which I think is slide 6. I'm keeping an eye on the time to make sure I don't eat into the discussion time. This slide I put up, this is just my kind of sense of, I get called at home dad humor. This is my version of dad humor, because I was trying to work out how to explain where I think the kind of disconnect is around this whole topic around accreditation and validation and skills and knowledge, etc. So we've used this notion of exchanging currency, which you might have at a bank, or you've got the notion of the analogy of maybe a passport, and have you got your paperwork to proceed through borders. But also, this is an important one as well, I think. I have put mine at the top and centre, having come from Derbyshire, but everybody has a dialect. Dialects are not superior to others. I don't want to get into that debate because that could end up in a mess. But the point is, we all tend to use different ways of talking about often the very same thing. If you think about that notion of definition of dialect, it is about the word choices of a particular group of people. The reality is that this exchange of accreditation and validation can sometimes simply be a matter of about the language. Language does matter, and unpacking the language matters. But when I use the expression, dare I say it, chip cob, and you'd have to look it up if you don't know what one of those are. But if I use that expression chip cob, is I have these discussions all over the place with different people as a bit of a joke. It's a bit like that tomato thing with the Americans. Different expressions, but they do actually mean the same thing. So when you see the picture, you say, yeah, I recognize that. So some of this stuff can simply be about dialect, and I would encourage policing to value its own dialect and its own language. You do not have to surrender and get rid of your own dialect to somehow adopt someone else's language. The reality is, be proud of what you're doing in policing, and the point is we can then accredit what you're doing in policing and grow the pathways simply by accepting, understanding, acknowledging the fact that sometimes this is about simply different forms of currency being exchanged, different sorts of language being exchanged, but this notion of parity, of equivalence, of quality is still very relevant. And I see it, having worked in academia, I've seen it working in policing for over 30 years. The quality is there, and what we need to do is just get it recognized for internal and external benefit. If you could put me on slide 7, please, Lisa. Just to quickly run through this, I'm conscious of time. Some of the things that I've noticed in policing and academia, and I've worked in both for over 20 years simultaneously, really. So I don't know everything about everything, but I've seen quite a lot in both sides of this imaginary fence. And I put some things up on here for you, again, as a confidence boost for you in policing to think about, actually, we're pretty good at this. The first one I've put up there, and I've called it the notion of provenance. Now, provenance is something that you'll hear antique dealers talking a lot about, because if you go into an antique dealer and you go into an auction, etc., provenance is very important, because provenance, in a sense, means where things have come from. and everything's come from somewhere. Now, the notion of where things come from is very important in policing. So in policing, you wouldn't necessarily go to a job and then listen to the first person who spoke to you or the person who shouted the loudest and just say, oh, well, they've told me that must be the truth, that's it. You don't do that. You grade intelligence, you look for first accounts, and then you do corroborative evidence afterwards. You have to fulfill that through disclosure principles by law. You know, you're sometimes exploring investigations, and you're doing this through not only for prosecution but also on behalf of the defence, because that's the nature of disclosure. You're looking for the full facts, the full information. You don't rely on information that's just given to you. You test it. And in academia, the same thing happens. We don't necessarily use the same language. Neither profession probably would use the term provenance. I'm just using that as a word to explain that actually it's the same thing, but we're looking at it with different currency. We're using different dialects. But in academia, they talk about the notion of rigor, having research rigor. They talk about the principle of referencing. Everything must come from somewhere. You must show where it's come from. We do that in policing. If you think about our intelligence and how MG files are collated, and they have principles concerning plagiarism. So in plagiarism in academia, that's the notion if you steal somebody else's work and pretend it's yours, that's an example. Now in policing, if you try to make out that witness A had said what witness B would say, you'd be talking about offences at court. So it's the same thing. So the provenance is strong, and I would say provenance is as strong in policing as in academia. In knowledge exchange, that next one down there, whether I've got time to get through all these, I talk too much, as Paul will know. So following SOAM, we had changes, but basically policing is pretty dynamic in terms of its digital footprint, how it exchanges information. So Andy Marsh mentioned about the training that, you know, goes through with firearms officers. And if something happens, you know, in Aberdeen today, people in Plymouth tomorrow will probably know about the incident because they'll be learning in a very dynamic fashion. They exchange relevant information really fast. And I would argue in terms of knowledge exchange, comparing that to academia, there are lots of silos in academia where people just do very disciplined work on certain areas, and findings can be very slow to come out. So people will talk about maybe academia having a stronger process of knowledge exchange, as they call it, but I would say, look, within policing, you're actually pretty good at this. Inductivity and deductivity, I won't get a chance to get through all these now looking at my timing, is that the process of inductivity means that you listen first, you have an open mind, and deductivity is the notion of having a kind of a working hypothesis. You've maybe come to an early conclusion and you think this is the answer, and you go out to then try and prove it. Now, I think policing has learned to be very inductive over time. Unfortunate cases such as that with Stephen Port and the investigative debriefs around that and the role of the coroner did point out that if you make your mind up too quick and kind of dismiss potential other forms of evidence, you can end up with tragic consequences. And it reinforces the importance of being inductive. And the reason on the right-hand side there, I've put that this can happen also in academia is that many years ago, there was a famous mathematician who came over from India, and he came over with new ideas about mathematics and approaches to mathematics. And his colleagues at Oxford and then Cambridge were very dismissive of what he said, simply because he brought in change, and they didn't like the notion of change. So the notion that somehow academia wouldn't fall into these traps is not true. So both professions are still wrestling with the notion of being inductive and being deductive. And policing, I think, has got a lot of evidence that it has learned over the years to be very inductive. Just quickly, because I think in my last literally few seconds, and I will go away, is that you've got a strong public service ethos in policing, which needs to be recognised, and the impact that you're working with in policing is about do or die. My final points on these, and I've had to rush through that slide a little bit there, but nevertheless, I hope these will be available for you and just trigger some thoughts about confidence, is that you do have the skills in policing and you can get validated and accredited. And I think the benefit in doing all of that, just to reinforce it, is about the worth and value it gives you internally. And also that could be aligned to what we do around PDR or maybe licenses in the future. Then that represents a form of passport to be able to exchange those skills to the outside world and show the outside world how skilled you actually are. And I'd like to see that then mainstreamed as a way of being an internal currency in policing, around PDRs or licenses, and maybe the promotion process as well in terms of promoting talent. But my message to you is that you can do this, and I think the organisations that are supporting you, like the Federation, the college, etc., I think have some benefit to offer here in strengthening how more dynamically we can show to ourselves how good we are and show the outside world how good we are, because policing is getting a lot of bad press, and I think it's a little bit unfair because it doesn't represent the volume of the brilliant work that takes place every day. So I'm going to stop there because I may be just 1 minute over time. I apologise for that.
Presentation there is about you can do this. I would encourage you to watch our seminar, Masters in Investigation, that we did earlier this year, because I gave myself as a case study. You know, I have a BTEC in leisure and tourism, and I'm now doing a master's degree in police leadership. That's not because I want to be a police leader, far from it, heaven forbid. But it's, yeah, I spend a lot of my time criticising leaders, so I might as well be qualified for it. So, but yeah, it was just the fact that I'm working at an operational level of 7 that got me onto the master's degree. I didn't need the qualifications, and this is the whole point of today. You don't need a background of qualifications in academia to get onto a degree. It's something you can do just by demonstrating the level that you're working at. So, but please do watch that other seminar. I'm now going to introduce you to Dave Bamber. Dave's a retired not detective. I promoted you there, didn't I?
No, that's
sergeant, a retired sergeant. He used to be the professional development lead before me. He's going to host the panel's discussion and put any questions that you have to us.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, and thanks for the speakers that have already spoken. And we will definitely be getting some questions coming in. We already have some that have been formulated and that have pulled through to us. So whilst we've still got John, I believe we've still got John online. Can you hear us, John?
I am still here. Apparently I switched my camera off by mistake. Don't leave me in charge of buttons.
It's quite all right, as long as we can hear you and you can hear me. I do have a question to come straight back to you, just to clarify something that you were saying about where the skills map over, essentially, from policing. One of the issues that you get from a lot of police officers with regards to taking on academia is, how am I going to be assessed? How am I going to be assessed? Am I capable of doing it? Are you saying that if you can put together a crime file, you can probably put together a dissertation, it's at the same level? If you can investigate a crime, then you can research a subject area. If you can identify a crime pattern or a community issue and come up with a solution to address it, then you can do a research project. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes. So, for example, I'm external examiner at the University of South Wales, is they do a doctoral program. They're quite progressive, and it's doctoral practice, and they invite you to submit 3 operations that you've been involved in. So there might be football, firearms, public engagement, or whatever. You send basically the projects through, and then also you send 10,000 words, all right, which might sound a lot, but it's not actually, when you think about how much scribbling you do in policing. And you basically explain as a form of kind of learning journal or a narrative about why you did what you did in those operations. You do the notion of why you do what you do on decision-making logs, for example. So it's not only what you do, but it's why have I chosen that option from these other options. That's like the national decision-making model. So basically, you can get a doctorate there by doing police work. And the notion of you saying, if you can do research, is it the same as doing an MG file? Yes, because when we come back to that notion of dialects and use of language, if you think about what research is, and if you think about an investigation is, it's inquiry. You're going to try and find out what has happened. And it's often about the jigsaw pieces, trying to find the jigsaw pieces, joining them up, joining the dots. Research is the notion of finding out what we did not know before and then what we do with it. So if you think about it, investigation, research, dialect are the same thing. Now, there are some subtle rules of the game how these things are different, but a great researcher, great investigator, a great investigator is a great researcher. The point is that we've got these divides at the minute. We seem to focus more on how they are separate than they are actually the same. They are very, very close. And what's dividing them is the notion of accrediting these skills and working through that language. And if you see bad research sometimes done, and you sometimes see bad investigations done, they're also echo each other. So in answer to your question, yes. And so I'm very hopeful that actually we could make massive improvement and steps on this actually very quickly, just taking a fresh mindset about thinking about what connects us rather than what divides us, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense to me. Jim, I'm going to come to you then on that same kind of topic, really. You've heard it, I've heard it, we've all heard it. I think Paul may have even said it at the beginning. You don't need a degree to be a police officer. We've heard that. We've heard people within the organisation say, we don't want a load of academics in the job. Why do you think that's the case?
So the argument's been really polarised, isn't it, about having a degree? And that actually is the wrong argument. The argument really has really been explained already by Sir Andy, I think, and it's all underpinned by the world that we live in and we operate in as cops. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, who is the gold, silver, bronze commander at that incident? And forgive me, Sir Andy, it's not the chief constable, it's that officer. So the level of learning, as John has eloquently explained there, that everyday response cops are working at is at that degree level. Now, obviously, they have to learn through an experiential approach, and we academia fully supports that. It brings in the notion of reflective learning, so we learn as we go along. And some of the culture of policing has sometimes inhibited that kind of learning. Blame culture is really a thing, and some of the organisations that are there both to support policing and keep it legitimate, equally, can err into this kind of blame culture. And again, Sir Andy, highlighted that the kind of professions that police are working with day in and day out, sometimes 24/7, are also accredited in exactly the same way. It's not about the degree, it's about the level of knowledge and how they apply it. And that's what happens at degree level. Again, John's touched on that already, but looking at some of that experiential learning and then mapping it against learning objectives is a way of accrediting externally. And I would argue that, as a former police officer who's been in and around policing for 40 years now, that's what the public actually need. And so when these arguments about confidence in policing are had, it's partly because policing hasn't addressed that level of complexity. And this method is one of the ways of demonstrating that. And actually having the work of cops externally examined against that should give us a fair bit of confidence that policing is doing the right thing.
Thank you. Andy, I'm just going to come on with a very similar one, actually. PQF was originally designed as a through career accredited pathway. Now, it appears to have been decommissioned. It doesn't appear to have picked up the support from the organisation that would have been hoped in the first instance. So what lessons have the police learned from trying to implement this through career accredited pathway, and how can it be done better next time?
I'm the only chief that is still about with continuous service from when the issue of PQF was discussed and commissioned. I was Chief Constable of Hampshire at the time, and engaged in a debate with other chiefs at the time. And one of my predecessors, Alex Marshall, actually was the Chief Executive of the college, who was developing this at a pace. And I fundamentally was opposed to the idea that you had to have a degree to be a police officer, because I think people that are watching will think about the fantastic police officers they know that haven't got a degree. But what completely turned the debate on its head for me is what Jim said. It's not about degree, actually. It's about the standard of the learning. It's about the complexity of the profession and the everyday mission that the people facing the most difficult decision making on the front line face. How do we best prepare them? And oh, by the way, it's a level 6 qualification, which is a degree. Now, where did we go wrong? The first entry of the new entry routes. Well, take a step back. everyone agreed that initial police learning needed to be replaced. The degree, the apprenticeship levy came along, and chiefs, being chiefs, and I was one of them, thought about the millions of pounds that have been sliced out of police budgets for apprenticeships, which I think is a very sound idea, actually. If you want to develop the skills of your workforce, and if you want to be a competitive nation in a global economy, then that's probably quite an important thing. The attention of chiefs was turned to, well, how are we going to claim a substantial amount of that money back for training our people as quickly as possible? And we alighted on the degree apprenticeship entry route, which was then developed and deployed at a pace which I don't think the service did itself justice with keeping up with. So we can look back at what happened now, and let me look at it through the lens of my own organisation, Avon Somerset Constabulary. We weren't an early joiner, but we were early-ish, and we selected a higher educational institution, the University of the West of England, that they were local, they were good. We already had some partnership with them. I was very happy with that choice. But when we started putting the first people through it, and surprise, surprise, it was a little bit bumpy. Some of the sequencing was wrong. The blend of classroom and in person perhaps was out of kilter. What the force did, what the university did, we hadn't thought through. Anyway, we had a very early meeting between the force, me, and the university, and we agreed that unless we could sort this out, it wasn't going to work properly. So what we did was some problem solving. It's what our initial learning trains people to do, solve problems. And we sorted it out. And I have to say, I think there are many good HEIs involved in police learning. I was really pleased with what University of West of England did. Fantastic. And I've been to their graduation since, and I've seen the quality of the recruits coming through. And I tell you, this does grip me when you hear anecdote in the media, and these are policing should be far more attentive of the evidence base, the facts. Our average age of recruit is not 19, it's mid-20s. These people have done other work on occasions. I mean, I joined straight out of university, so I was a youngster, but these people are not like that. And whilst I was in many respects as a new recruit from the 80s, competent in the law, I was utterly incompetent on the art of policing and the science of policing. They are so much better prepared than I was to do the task they've got. And so why did it go wrong, Dave? And we've all got to take responsibility for this, certainly me. Some police forces simply outsourced it to HEIs and then complained when it was wrong. They didn't do what I did with the University of West of England. It wasn't a proper partnership where you're vested in each other's success for the benefit of the student officers. Some HEIs, to be honest, possibly weren't best placed to undertake this work. They weren't experienced in true adult learning and modern apprenticeship and practice-based work, and then it was rather systematically undermined. Now, I do think the position that we've got, where we've got 4 different entry routes: a pre-joined degree, PEQF, degree holders apprenticeship, and then the police council entry programme, all complying with the same curriculum, and it may well be that the PSET moves to some form of external accreditation in time. We never reached the end of the story on initial police learning. And if we're true to what Jim was saying about that we're a critical thinking occupation, that we constantly learn and improve, nor ever should we reach the end of that story. But what I say to chiefs now is you must take responsibility for the quality of your initial learning and be thoughtful about the blend of recruits that you bring in through those different routes, all of which have different attraction features to different groups of people. And if we want to recruit from across the whole society, we should play to the strengths of those initial routes. So a lot of learning. I did put my shoulder behind it when I got into this job 3 years ago, but I wish I'd applied more criticality to that, and we may have had a chance of, I guess, being more thoughtful in the development of the programme.
And it appeared that PEQF became focused just on initial entry as opposed to that through career development programme. That never seemed to take off.
Yeah, right? well, I mean, in fairness, a lot of forces, and I've encouraged HEIs to explore this as well, have developed apprenticeships which they can draw the levy down for other learning. But one of the most important things that the entry route should bring is the ability to think critically about the problems that you're facing. That's what policing needs. We need people to be able to use their discretion. That's the most valuable thing they've got. Now, there's an anecdote about when I went to training school, which I won't tell, but I disagreed with something that was said by the trainers about the application of the law, and I challenged it, and I was ridiculed and humiliated because I challenged it, given an inappropriate nickname as it happens. But my closing report, this is the main point, the closing report said PC Marsh will do better if he takes the advice of his superior officers. So they told me to shut up and do as I was told. Now actually that is not, there's a time when you must follow your instructions, but most of the time when police officers and indeed staff are solving the complex problems that they face, we need them to use what's between their ears and use their judgment. All of the things that Jim was talking about, I think, in a really encouraging way. That's what policing needs a little bit more of. And I do challenge the people around me continually. What is it that I'm doing that we're doing in 10 years' time will appear ridiculous, that we really do need to start thinking about getting ahead of the curve on. And if I'm to continue to be a relevant leader within policing, I need really good people around me that are going to challenge me, impress me, and those are people that benefit from the sort of critical thinking that this training and education gives you.
Jim, with regards to that issue and the issue of officers thinking, and that's what education is supposed to be about, isn't it? Developing an understanding, being able to be a creative, free thinker, a personal thinker. The police seem a bit obsessed with APP, with one best way. How do those two things match?
Yeah, and actually, I think it's been mentioned. So things like, for example, with the national decision model, I can go into lecturer mode and describe it as a feedback loop, but actually it should help us make detailed decisions in theory, but you can literally tick boxes. So if you can't apply it and think about what you're going to do at each stage, you are merely just following a model. That's the risk then of using something like an APP. And so Andy talked about, the what works, is say that then is identical to the problem that I've got. And so that level of critical thinking that we do, and any of us who have been in policing will have done this at some point, right, I just need to follow this checklist. That's not critical thinking. And that really applies right back to the initial learning, is that we can learn the law, but how we apply it and whether we apply it, whether it's absolutely necessary, it is that same kind of thinking. So I think the APPs, and I've contributed to several when I was in the job, is a good place to start. But much like if you were doing a dissertation and you're going to do a literature review, that's the place to start, as Sandy has said about the pathway that police learning is on. It's not the end point. You are advancing knowledge to a point, but whether to apply that APP, because when these things are written, they're written in a very cozy atmosphere. It will be collegiate in the sense of probably sitting around the table, and again, I've contributed to something like that, and it all makes sense when it's written in on the page. But can it apply to every single set of circumstances? Absolutely not, and that's the risk.
Can I just say something about that, Dave? When I joined the police, we had something called standing orders. Yeah. And standing orders literally
About that big.
told you what to do under open circumstances.
Yeah.
My first exposure to chief officers happened when I was an inspector, about 12 years in, and I became the chief staff officer, and I had to effectively clear out like reams of information, including the standing orders. And I didn't read them all, but I just flicked through. I thought, my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the scenarios it was describing what I should do would make a good comedy these days. But policing can't be a join the dots from A to Z. You must follow these steps. It is much too complicated for that. If it was ever like that, and it probably was, when we only had to do a handful of very high profile sort of publicly committed crimes. I am in constant thought about the level of detail that we offer. The college offers such a wealth of practice and guidance which I wish I'd known about when I was a detective, a uniform officer, a superintendent, and so on, and chief constable. And I did think that I was pretty well read around policing, and until I started this job, and I'm still learning, which makes it fascinating. We do need to think about how we use tools such as AI to get people on the front line in the heat of the moment just the right amount of information that not will tell them what to do. That's impossible, but will inform them to make the best possible decision. And sometimes there are no good decisions, we know about that, but the best possible decision. So we have that in mind, should we achieve sufficient funding to be able to do it.
And the funding is a big issue.
Yeah.
Paul, you have sat patiently and silently, which is unusual to an extent, unlike you. All the talk is about how the organisation wants people to develop. It wants individuals to go out and do this for themselves. It wants this to happen to make policing better. But you sit on the college board. You sit as a national board member at the Police Federation as the professional development lead. You go to these seminars, you talk to the great and good in policing. How do they really view education? How do they really view learning? What is their real intentions from training, do you think?
Good question, and honestly, I can't really say what they're thinking, but the way I perceive the response that I'm getting is that we seem to have this culture in police, certainly historically, a culture in policing where something bad happens, we scrabble together some training package, and then we mandate it, and we therefore tick a box to say we've delivered this training, and therefore the risk is mitigated to the organisation when something goes wrong again. But there's no measure in between the training that's being delivered and the learning, and there's a distinction between training and learning. You can give someone all the training in the world, if they're not learning from it, if they're not embedding that learning in how they perform as a police officer, then what's the point in the training in the first place? And I do think, and I do get the impression, certainly around the country, that we play a lot of lip service to training. We do it in response to things. We don't have a learning culture in police, and we don't have officers that are invested in as well as they should be, who want to aspire to do things. I'd like to see clear but flexible pathways from the moment you join the police to the moment you retire, where you can take different routes, whether that's promotion, specialism, or anything like that, with milestones where you get some accredited training. And you need that accreditation because, like I said before, you give the training, but where's the test that you've embedded the learning? Where do you check that? Where are the checks and balances? We have PDRs, for example, but are they really working properly? We don't even get that right. So, and it certainly isn't being reflected nationally in performance. Forces aren't performing particularly well, so we'd be fair to assume that they're not really doing much learning from the training they're getting. Otherwise, the performance would improve, but it's not. So I think we need to look at accredited training. It doesn't have to be a degree, make that quite clear, but we need to have some form of method where we deliver the training, someone external comes in, tests the learning that they've taken from that training, and assesses forces need to be evaluated on how well they're embedding that learning, on their performance. That's where the HMIC come in. So that's how I'd like to see it. But at the moment, I do think a lot of chiefs pay a lot of lip service. We have the process at the moment, we front load quite a lot. People join the police, we give them a huge amount of input training. Some do the degree course, some do the PSET routes, but there's a huge amount given at the start. We then set officers out on the streets. It's fair to say that there's a lack of experience now amongst police officers. Gone are the days where you could be out walking the streets with someone nearing the end of their career. They're out with someone who didn't finish their probation that long before then. And if they're getting it wrong, if they're teaching the new recruits wrong, then that's just going to completely develop. So I'll come back to my point again. You need to check, there needs to be checks and balances, there needs to be accreditation, there needs to be some evaluation on the training that we're giving, just to make sure that it's being learned from and being delivered upon.
On the word learn, I've heard it repeatedly over the past 20, 30, 40, however many years from policing. There's an issue happens and we hear the words lessons have been learned. And that's about education. That's about the organisation developing itself and the other people. Jim, I'll come to you first, and then to you, Paul. Do you think the organisation has learned lessons and been able to develop itself in that way over the years?
I think there is evidence that it can. And actually, Sir Andy gave a good example in his presentation around the leadership, which is my kind of subject matter area. insofar as up until around about 2015, the service didn't recognise, or certainly the College of Policing in its earliest iteration just said, leadership starts basically when you get to Chief Inspector, and it specifically said that. So it can. The danger is, and if you, Drucker says that that culture eats strategy for breakfast, and that's part of the problem, I think, because some of these decisions are strategic decisions, but the impact of what they're going to be and how it makes people feel actually isn't thought through. There are lots of reasons for that. Politics, society, complexity, people perhaps not understanding when they're making those decisions what that's all about. But I think we need to address that kind of culture of thinking before we're going to be able to say we've learned lessons, because there's plenty of evidence to say that we haven't. And I'm not going to go through the long list of horrible cases, tragic cases that lead me to say that. That said, there is some, John alluded to this, I think Paul's alluded to it, is that there are massive opportunities in terms of working with partners like HE, but other forums as well, to accredit and to kind of offer that external overview of the work that's already going on. And I am aware of other forces who are trying to do this kind of cradle to grave pathway. So people feel valued. And again, you look at some of the external reports, a lot of this is about a lack of organisational justice. That is, people not feeling that they're being valued and being given the opportunities. And that's why we are seeing people not at the beginning of the service in the way that people perceive, mid-service deciding to leave. And there's a lot of work that could be done to kind of try and make people feel valued. And I think retain the best officers that we've got for the right reasons.
And Paul, I'd say on that, about the lessons that have been learned, and Jim just talks about culture within the organisation. Should, or do you think that with regards to this development, with regards to this education, quite rightly, this is a federation event that's going on today. This is a federation discussion. And we talk about the development of federated officers and the training for them. Is it there that you think that the training and the learning needs to be pitched, or should it be a top-down approach where senior officers, senior managers, chief constables are the ones who require that political strategy input from academia?
I'll just turn into the expression "lessons have been learned" first. To me, it's become tired and meaningless. It's it's words that get rolled out every time something bad happens. And like I said before, they cobble together some training. We tick a box, and then in a year or two's time, something similar happens again, and forces turn around and say, "Well, we've given them all the training. We don't understand why that's happened again." But it's because they haven't done the learning from it. That's the problem. But turning to your question there around, I think where you're edging towards is the license to practice, which I think we're on the pathway towards. I struggle to see how we can have a license to practice if we don't have in place means of accrediting and testing. But it has to be top down. It cannot be bottom up. If the people who are setting the cultures, setting the standards, and driving for the direction of travel for forces, if they're not the ones who are accredited to do that, then how can they be the ones telling people below them how to do things? They're the ones that need to be accredited first in order to impart that wisdom for people beneath them. But it definitely has to be top down for me.
And talking of top down, I'm going to give you a moment to think about this, because we've got a slight technical issue that needs to be addressed, which will take a matter of moments. So, Mr. Marsh, I'm going to preempt you with the question. License of practice, this is where it seems to be leading. It's something that's been debated repeatedly over the past decade or so. Will it come into fruition? Where should it start? Where should it be pitched at? And if you just keep your thoughts for a moment whilst we sort out a technical issue.
Do apologise. We had a slight technical issue there with one of the batteries in the cameras, but we're back live, and Dave's just asking a question to Andy there.
Yeah, Mr. Marsh, I'll just repeat it very briefly. Licence to practice, been on the cards for a while. Will it come in? Where will it be pitched at within the organisation, do you think?
Well, I'm going to, you've indulged me, it's my last words probably, because I'm going to shoot off to London. So I'll wrap up a few things. First of all, the service has got a problem with learning. It's why in my last tour saving in Somerset, I made learning one of the key values, because we had an issue with blame. The service has got an issue with learning and blame, and if we are to truly professionalise, we need to get on top of that. Some forces are very good at it, some got some more work to do. What do we need to learn? If you have a look on our website and some research into all of the HMIC reports, IAPC recommendations, coroner's recommendations of the last 5 or so years, has come up with the 10 perennial problems in policing. If you can solve them, you deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. So that's the sort of stuff we need to learn. Where should the learning start? And the new National Centre for Police Leadership, much of which is vested in the responsibility of the forces to deliver, because we're just not resourced to do it. We started with sergeants, because we felt that was a really important area as first line. And you think, people watching, think about the worst times in your career, the best times in your career, probably was around the sort of issues that your line manager was or wasn't doing. Moving on to licence to practice, if your question. Policing's such an important part of modern democratic society. I think we are on a journey about how we get there. If you think about the people on the call, the areas which you are trained and accredited in, which you would struggle to represent if you left the job tomorrow, all accredited, by the way, through the College of Policing, your college, detectives, use of force, taser, PPSE, firearms, the National Search Centre, globally renowned National Search Centre, public order, initial police training, driver training. I could go on. We need a College of Policing that is your professional body that you're proud of, and yet our culture turns us quickly against each other, and we need to change that to make progress. But also turning to funding, there are many benefits to localism. Policing is an £18 billion sector. I'll always argue, by the way, for officers to be paid more because of what you do. And I'll always argue for more money in it. But guess what your professional body receives by way of national annual grant? It was £53 million in 2014. It's now 30.5. Is that the value that we place in the professionalism and the training and accreditation of policing? So look, in answer to your question, Dave, the reason why I'm still here after 37 years service is I believe in what you do. I believe in what we stand for. And I believe that you deserve the best and the public deserve the best too. So I think this is a journey which I've needed to make decisions about. Do we go for a flash bang moment where we try and get this across the line, or am I a pragmatist? And I am, to be honest with you, where we rise the tide where the opportunity presents itself. So that's what I want to do with you. I hope that I'll see it in my service, but I think it's not the thing that's going to make everything all right, but it's another brick in the foundations that is going to put policing back to where we need it to be.
Paul, I'm going to hand over to you in a moment, but just to say we have had quite a few questions coming through whilst the panel have been in discussion. Some of those questions are actually relevant to this afternoon's panel session. So I'll collate them in the meantime and probably put them to the panel this afternoon, and we'll be in a position to answer those questions. But because there's trains to be caught, there's technical issues to be addressed, there is legs to be stretched from both the panel and those who are joining us online. I'll hand back to you to close this session off.
Thanks, Dave. I hope you found that informative. It's really about setting the foundations for the rest of the day. What we're going to look to do after the break, we come back at 11:35. We're going to speak to Karen Morton from the College of Policing. She's going to look at we want to look at some of the barriers that seem to be in the way of officers going on and getting some qualifications and accreditation. And one of those is the funding. So the College of Policing offer a bursary. Some forces offer bursaries. There are other institutions that offer bursaries. There are ways of getting other people to pay for your qualifications. So we're going to look at that and how you go about it. And then if all else fails and you need to take out a loan in order to fund it, then Rob Lovesey from Serve and Protect Credit Union, he's going to come along and talk about the educational loan that they offer. So we'll go to the break now early, and can I ask you all to come back for 11:35 when we'll start again. Thank you. Without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to Karen Morton now. She works at the College of Policing, and she is in charge of the bursary scheme there.
Hello, I am just sorting out my presentation at this end. You've got the presentation at that end, and I'm just going to tell you when to scroll through to the next slides. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you today. My name is Karen Morton. I'm a Senior Research Officer at the College of Policing. I'm going to be talking to you about your bursary scheme hosted by the College of Policing. So if you move on to the second slide, please. So as an overview of the college bursary scheme, the scheme exists to support officers and staff to develop their skills, knowledge and expertise in the use of research and to support continuous professional development. The scheme offers support to tuition fees for academic study at level 6 undergraduate and above. And the study must be relevant to your current role or future professional development. And the programme that you're proposing to study must include a research component. And I'll talk you through those elements throughout my presentation. So next slide, please. Oh, apologies. Maximum funding, £4,000 over 2 years, £2,000 per year, but this is all subject to confirmation of funding. We offer, we run the bursary on a basis of securing funding on a year-by-year basis. So when the scheme is advertised, you just need to double check what we might be offering. Right, so I was going to talk you through recipients that have received bursaries between 2016 to 2023 to just give you a flavour of the types of people who have been offered funding. So just over half of the bursaries awarded in that period have gone to police constables and sergeants, and around 27%, so kind of just under a third, to police staff. And those people have been studying a variety of disciplines. It's included policing, criminology, cybersecurity, leadership and psychology. And we don't prescribe which courses you should be applying to, so the choice is completely down to you. So most of those recipients, around 80%, have been studying at postgraduate level and the remainder at undergraduate. A third have no prior undergraduate level qualification or postgraduate qualification. 43% do have a prior undergraduate degree and 25% have a prior postgraduate qualification. And bursaries within that period were offered to 45 forces, covering a diverse range of higher education institutes. So next slide, please. Who can apply? So police officers working in England and Wales and members of police staff also working in England and Wales. National Crime Agency members of staff, and everybody must have passed their full probationary period. There are no minimum education qualifications required to qualify for a bursary scheme. So, what can I use the bursary funding for? So the College of Policing bursary covers payment of tuition fees only and not other associated costs. So we wouldn't be looking to cover travel, accommodation, laptops, conference attendance and those kind of things. So you can use a bursary alongside other financial support. So you can match other funding. For example, your force might put forward some money, or you can top up money from other sources. You just need to check any restrictions under other funding that's been provided. And certainly for the College of Policing bursary, there can't be any crossover of funding. So for example, if your tuition fees in a year were £3,000 and you had £1,500 from your force for the first year, we could only offer you £1,500 for that year. And those amounts, again, are subject to confirmation of our pot of money each year. Next slide, please. So other potential funding sources. I just wanted to cover a few things, and this was off the call that we had in preparation for this seminar. Just to let you know, our bursary scheme it's a competitive process. So if you apply, you won't necessarily get the money because you're competing against everybody else who applies for that year. So it's always useful to look at what other sources of funding there might be available. So I've just set out a few of these here. I'm not an expert, so you would need to go off and do your own research about these funding sources. So you might be able to apply for a personal loan offered by Police Mutual, which is specifically for professional training. I'm not sure if that covers the same type of courses covered by the bursary. There are professional and career development loans offered by the government. On the government websites, there are loads of information about the various loans that they offer. For example, government advanced learner loans. You've got government student finance, student loans. There are government doctoral loans, government master's loans. There's all sorts on there. So do a bit of research to see what other options there might be out there for you. And universities run their own bursary, grant and scholarship schemes, so it's worth looking at them. And some forces do also offer their own bursary schemes. For example, I'm aware that the Met do offer their own bursaries. So next slides, please. Choosing your course. So as mentioned, and this goes back to John's presentation talking about the different levels of qualification, level 6 and above. So essentially you could apply for a bursary if the course that you're planning to study is either undergraduate, so a bachelor's course, for example, or postgraduate, so a master's or a higher education diploma or a PhD, for example. The course has to be, to qualify for bursary funding, recognised, offered at a recognised UK academic institution. And I've included a link there for you to check the institution that you're thinking of applying to. And we can't offer funding for study at institutions in the Republic of Ireland. And the course must include a research component, and that's really important to this, and a real emphasis of the bursary scheme, because the funding comes from the pot of money for the research part of the college, which is all about increasing capability and skills in research and applying those in practice to ensure that good evidence is being used in policing. So the minimum you would want your course to cover is a module on research. So a bachelor's course, for example, might have a module or several modules on research methods. However, most undergraduate and postgraduate degrees do include a requirement to fulfill a research dissertation. Ideally, this would be on a subject matter that will bring value to the force as well as to yourself. And we definitely recommend speaking to your line manager or L&D department, or you might have a research strategy or evidence-based policing department in your force who can help as well. What works for you? So you need to find a course that works for you. There are lots of options out there. You can study full-time, part-time, distance learning, and lots of universities offer modular learning schemes. It's important that you talk about your study plans with your line manager and secure their support early. And and also explore your forced training and professional development policy to check what time off you might be given and other support that's available in terms of attending lectures, undertaking coursework and conducting your research. Next slides, please. So we've just got a quote here from one of our former bursary recipients. This is Sergeant Lorna Dennison-Wilkins. She's a police search advisor and first applied to the bursary scheme in 2017 and was awarded 2 years funding for her PhD at the Centre for Anatomy and Human Identification, University of Dundee. She subsequently applied for a follow-on bursary in 2019 and was also successful and was awarded a further bursary. Lorna's research is on search and recovery of bodies from water to inform missing person investigations. She was successfully awarded her PhD in 2021 and is considered a real expert in the field. She's got a number of academic journal publications and has travelled internationally to present her research. Next slide, please. So we've heard a bit about recognition of prior experience and learning. I refer to it here as RPL or RPEL, RPEL. Different organisations tend to use slightly different wording. I won't dwell on this, but there has been mention of the credit estimator on the College of Policing website, which is a really useful tool to see what credits you might be able to receive for your prior experience and learning. And undertaking this assessment and potentially getting credits can really reduce the cost of study and the time taken to complete the course. And this is demonstrated by the example on the next slide. So this is DC Paul Causey, who's a serving police officer with Greater Manchester Police. He missed out on going to university after finishing sixth form at school. He applied for a bursary and was successful to study an undergraduate programme in policing with the Liverpool Centre for Advanced Policing Studies at Liverpool John Moores. And Paul actually used the College of Policing professional development platform for an overview of the RPL process and use the credit estimator to see how many credits he might get. He discussed his potential application with the university and completed a short but detailed reflective assignment to support his claim for credits based on his previous learning and experience. And following successful completion of the assignment, Paul was granted 240 credits towards a qualification. This is the equivalent of the first 2 years of an undergraduate degree. So, you know, it's really worth doing a bit of research to see what's out there and what institutions out there might be able to offer you to some credits, regardless of what your previous level of education was and when you last undertook learning. So next slide, team. I just wanted to talk you through the timeline of what typically happens with the College of Policing bursary scheme, and this is all anticipated and again subject to confirmation of funding. So next year and in subsequent years, we would typically hope to open the application window around March or April. We have to fit it around Easter. So we see where Easter falls each year and we decide whether or not to launch the bursary scheme before or after Easter. The applications are scored by 2 assessors, a mixture of internal college assessors and force assessors, and that happens around April and May. Where assessor scores don't agree, applications are moderated by a 3rd assessor at an internal panel, and then decisions are scrutinised by an external panel that has an academic on it, and that happens around June. There's lots of internal processes within the college, papers that are written that go to our exec, etc. And we hope to receive internal sign-off for our proposed shortlist around July and August, and then inform applicants of the outcome of their applications around early to mid-August. And then applicants and the force SPOCs are informed of the outcome, and the administration of the awards happens throughout August and October. There's administration direct between our bursary scheme and the individual recipients, but actually the money isn't sent to recipients, it's sent to the force. So there's paperwork that we have to do with the force. And then the recipient would have to speak to their institution and make sure that they've got everything set up for invoices to be sent to the force for the part of the funding that's covered by the bursary scheme. So next slide, please. So applicants are given an application form to fill out. You need to give yourself plenty of time to draft the application and to get it signed off from your line manager and your learning and development need. It's not the type of thing that you can do the night before, because simply you won't have the evidence to be competitive with the other applicants. I would definitely say if you don't have time to do the application, consider other sources of funding or maybe apply for the bursary scheme the following year. There are five key areas on the application form around your suitability, personal development, knowledge exchange, so how you will share the knowledge that you've learned and your research with other people to promote further learning, task management, so how are you going to manage your time, how are you going to do your study alongside the day job, what are the other things you need to think of, will it impact on your personal life or your family? And then a really significant question is around evidence-based policing, and I'll talk more about evidence-based policing shortly. Next slide, please. So enhancing evidence-based policing skills and understanding around EBP is a core aim of the scheme. We refer to the college definition of evidence-based policing. There's a link that's embedded to the application form. Please click on this and read it and make sure you're clear on what we mean by evidence-based policing. So this is the definition. In an evidence-based policing approach, police officers and staff create, review and use the best available evidence to inform and challenge policies, practices and decisions. And there will be other people in your force who you might be able to talk to get advice on this. There may be an evidence champion or a research champion in your force that you can speak to, or you could contact your bursary SPOC and try to get in touch with somebody in your force who's received a bursary previously. Next slide, please. How can research evidence help policing? So research can help develop a better understanding of an issue by describing the nature, extent and possible causes of a problem, or looking at how a change was implemented. It can also assess the effect of a policing intervention by testing the impact of a new initiative in a specific context, or exploring possible consequences of a change in policing. Now, we know that, there's a day job to be done and resources are limited, but this is all around finding out what works, and what works is a mantra. The College of Policing is the What Works Centre for Crime Reduction and Policing. It's really worth doing some work to find out if what you're doing is working in the way that was intended, or if it's having a negative effect, because then you will want to stop doing it. So evidence-based policing doesn't provide definitive answers that officers and staff should apply uncritically. It's about reflecting on practice and considering how the best available evidence applies to your work and learning from success and failures. Next slide, please. Again, going back to the best available evidence. So there's always a conflict, and we, on the bursary scheme, when we're assessing the applications year on year, there's confusion around the term evidence. Obviously, in policing, evidence is often used in the form of investigations and evidence around investigations related to a crime or an issue. But what we're calling evidence here are pieces of evidence that have been gleaned by research, where there's been some kind of method or process to research a particular issue and answer a question. The research should be carefully conducted, ideally peer-reviewed and transparent about how it's been done and any limitations around that research. And when there's little or no formal research available, other evidence can be used as the best available evidence. So, for example, carefully collated documents that you might be able to obtain, or from going and speaking to people who are experts in the area. Again, there are lots of different ways to get information about the best available evidence. You don't necessarily have to conduct a randomized control trial. So I just wanted, before finishing, to draw on a comment that Andy Marsh made in his presentation. He mentioned the Police National Library. So actually, this is just one form of support that the college can provide to those working in policing and undertaking learning or study. The library can offer free access to academic journals and databases and items that are not accessible outside of policing. They can advise you how to conduct literature searches and offer a wealth of expertise. So please use them. It's free. Anybody in policing can get an account with the Police National Library. The college also offers how-to guides for conducting research on interviews, focus groups, and designing questionnaires. They're hosted on our website. We have an academic support network, so offering peer support to those studying or thinking of studying who work in policing, and that's hosted on the Knowledge Hub. And we also offer research surgeries, so you can contact us. You just fill in a form and some information about what the issue is that you're seeking to do research on, and you can actually book a slot with a couple of researchers in the college who can provide advice to you on that particular piece of research. So if you feel like you need advice on your dissertation area, you can tap into some research expertise offered by the group of researchers at the college. So final slide, please. We'll move on to well, I'll let other people manage the questions, but you've got the bursary scheme email there. If you want to contact us, please feel free. There's a dedicated bursary scheme webpage where you can find out lots more information. And those resources I mentioned before, so the academic support network and the research surgeries, if you go up one level from the college bursary website, you can see on the link there, all of the details for those options are provided on the support for research page. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. The point of this section is really to look at different ways of funding a course, a qualification, an accreditation, a degree, without you having to put your hand in your own pocket. And to be frank, it's not right, is it really, that police officers are having to fund their own degree qualifications when those qualifications really are to make them better cops. You know, and it's an action I'm taking away as a professional development lead to try and work with police chiefs and influence them to look at ways that they can be funding their staff and officers to do these qualifications, because at the end of the day, it's in order to improve the performance of their force. So why shouldn't they be paying for it? But if all else fails, you don't get a bursary, you can't afford to fund it yourself, your force isn't going to pay for it. We have Serve and Protect Credit Union. Rob Lovesey from Serve and Protect Credit Union is here today to talk about an education loan that they put together just for police officers. And it's probably worth pointing out the lacuna in the earlier presentation. It's Serve and Protect Credit Union that are doing the education loan, not the competitor that was mentioned. But I'll pass you over to Rob. Thank you very much.
Here's the intro, Paul. I missed that initial hiccup, but yeah, it's Serve and Protect Credit Union that we work for, and it's a pleasure to be here today and just to share a bit of background and information about, as Paul said, another option that may be available to help fund any further education you may have in the future. Karen did a great job talking about the bursary option, and If you do qualify for that, or if the funding is available, then brilliant. But ultimately, it is about knowing what options are available. And ultimately, if you haven't got money saved and you do need to borrow money, you want to be borrowing that money responsibly. So we're just one option of many. And I'm going to talk about the education loan that we put together alongside National Police Federation with the support of Staffordshire University. So some of you may be aware, some of you may not, but Serve and Protect, we're one of the largest credit unions in the United Kingdom. We are a not-for-profit financial cooperative that actually serves the police family. So police officers and staff are welcome to make use of the credit union. We serve over 46,000 members. We're extremely proud to look after over £83 million worth of savings. And we've got about £77 million out on loan to fellow colleagues. So we are the size of a big bank or bill society. We're available to the police family, but again, there's a lack of awareness. So it's great to be able to be on sessions like this today to let you know about some of the products and services that may be available to support you. So what makes us different? A lot of people aren't aware what a credit union is, but it is, we serve an exclusive community. And obviously as a police officer, you're welcome to join. We actually have payroll deduction in place with 36 of the police forces throughout England and Wales. So it's actually a way to try and help people conveniently save, but it also provides an option of support if you need to borrow money and the repayments come straight from your pay. So it makes it nice and easy. And the key difference is we are for people, not profit. We do make a profit. So last year, for example, the credit union made nearly about £3 million. But what we do with that money, we pay it back to the people that save. We reinvest to bring out new products like this and services to support the police family. So it all goes back towards supporting our membership. So why are we here? You know, we're talking about options that are available. And typically when we engage with our members, if they need to borrow money, whether it's for educational purposes or for other purposes, typically they will have explored other options such as the bursary and try to explore funding that way. If they aren't available to get money to support that through those other means, they may have savings. But actually, it might be fascinating to know in the UK society at the moment, 46% of people have less than £1,000 saved in the easy access savings account. And when I speak to a lot of police officers of all ranks, it's a trend that we see emerging across the police family. Not everyone's got easy access savings to be able to respond and pay for things such as educational courses like this. You might be fortunate enough to have friends or family to turn to, but if you are on your own and you do need to borrow money, it may be the case that you may have to turn and consider different options. The credit union is just there as one option that you may want to explore. We've been in an economic climate of late where interest rates have obviously been increasing, other than last month where we saw a drop in that Bank of England base rate. What does that mean? We see a lot of members that actually pay for things just on their credit card. And a lot of people aren't realizing, as of January 2024, the average APR on a credit card was 34.8%. Now in August, last month, that average has dropped. So it's still around the 24% mark. And again, we see a lot of people turning to credit card providers to borrow for things like educational purposes, and they're not realizing just how much they're paying to borrow that original money. Now, there are other options out there. You may have great credit, you might be a homeowner, you might be able to borrow some headline rates from your banks or building societies, or qualify for 0% credit cards. Fantastic if that's available for you. But again, we just want you to know that there are options available. So if you explore other routes and you don't get the funding you're looking for, you need to know you've got access to affordable credit and can borrow responsibly if needed. So what have we done? We were approached by the National Police Federation and combined with Staffordshire University, we looked at the costs of funding the course and we tried to find a figure to do an exclusive rate as part of this course to try and find an option to support officers that may want to seek funding. This example here is if you wanted to look at funding of £6,500 and you repaid it over a 3-year period, so 36 months. What we tried to do is get that down to an affordable APR, so 5.9%, and try and get a monthly repayment lower than £200 a month. So this comes in at £197 a month. You pay it off over 3 years. You can see there the total interest charge is £591.86. So this is the amount it costs to actually pay the amount of interest is the total amount it costs to actually borrow the original amount. And obviously you have to pay back the original amount as well. So the total repayable is £7,091.86. Again, it's just an option to be aware of. So if you have explored other avenues and you haven't got the support that's available, just to be reassured that the credit union is there to support you if needed. There are additional benefits. There's no early repayment penalties. So if you want to pay lump sums off, you can when you wish. There's life cover at no extra cost, and the interest is calculated on a reducing balance. These are just some added benefits to be aware of. So if you're making a decision to borrow, these might be some attractive options that stand out compared to competitors. Now, we are responsible lenders, so it's not a guaranteed loan, for example. We do have people that come to us that are already in so much debt that we can't lend to them, or the affordability is just not there. So we obviously have to make you aware that you'll go through our standard affordability assessment if you were to apply. We do credit checks. So obviously we look at your current relationship with money and finances. We will ask for proof that you've been accepted on the course. And there may be some further eligibility criteria, but that's listed on our website. So we've got an example here of a copy of an unconditional offer that you may have once you apply for the course. So for example, we might ask to see a copy of that. So you may be able to then apply for a loan and get a decision in principle from the credit union. So you then know if you're in a good position to get that funding either before you apply, or you can apply for the course first, get your unconditional offer, and then come to the credit union to see if we can support that funding route. So how to apply, we've got a unique link there, and I'm sure the team will put that in the chat. So snpcu.co.uk/pole-ed-loan. A bit of a mouthful there, but they will put it in the chat, so do check it out. It will have specific details you can see there, breaking down the loan, explaining some of the benefits that are available, just reiterating what I've said today. So thank you for listening. Again, we are just one option of many. So I'll hand back to Paul. We've probably finished a bit sooner than on the agenda, but I know I'm what's between people and lunch. So Paul, I'll hand over to you and open the floor for any questions.
Thanks very much, Rob. It's probably worth pointing out that this education loan that Serve and Protect are putting on for police officers is not advertised in the same way that all their other products are, is that you need to access it through that link that was shown there. But I think you'll agree it's a very generous and kind of Serve and Protect to put this together for us. But as I reiterate my point from earlier, this is effectively a last resort. If you can't get funding from elsewhere, then this is where you might want to turn. And again, I think it's disappointing that forces aren't routinely putting their hand in their pockets to invest in officers to do their degrees. Some forces, as we heard earlier, do offer bursary schemes. I know the larger ones do. It's worth checking first. Look at all the options available first. If you can get someone else to pay for it, then please do. Afternoon, welcome back. Hope you all had a nice lunch. We now enter the more exciting part of the day, I would argue. We have three lecturers from three different universities who've come to talk to you today. First up, we have Jim Hollyoake from Staffordshire University. Jim's going to talk about the flexibility of higher education study and how the university can come to you. Over to you, Jim.
Okay, thank you very much. Wait for the slides to load. I know from being a lecturer now, using online material, that I prepare for failure every time. However, the slides are here. I'm Jim Hollyoake, and I am a senior lecturer in policing and leadership at Staffordshire University. And we have an institute there, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a moment. And then I'm going to talk about perhaps some of your perceptions of what higher education is. So let's see what happens next. Nothing at the moment. But that doesn't mean to say it's not going to happen. There you go. Click it again. So the Institute of Policing then. Now some of these things are very corporate, and we use terms like beacon of excellence in policing and professional practice. based on the fact that we have actually got national awards for what we're doing. We are a team of around about 30 lecturers, a cross section of people like myself who have had a fulsome career in policing, including as a police cadet officer, police staff member and volunteer in my case. And I spent the last 8 years or so in higher education, having got a master's degree when I was about 2/3 of my way through my service. We have already taught over 4,000 students, mainly through our undergraduate programs, but in the last 3 years we've also launched postgraduate programs as well. And in that team, and of course across the university, we have people like myself, we have people at different ranks who have left the job. Some have left mid-service, arguably disillusioned with the service and wanting to make a difference in a different way. But equally some very good career academics, including people with research expertise and publications. So we've got a fantastic blend of teaching staff and educators. And particularly over the last 5 years, developed an online presence using arguably the latest technology and looking, as Andy Marsh was saying this morning, that this isn't an end, it's part of that journey. So we have got a huge amount of experience in terms of police education, investigations and use of digital innovation to enhance your learning as a student. And we are here today because our main ethos is around continuous professional development. And we've been working with the Federation now for the last 18 months or so to support them in the aspiration for a culture of continuous development to be enhanced within policing. There's a lot out there, and obviously I've got colleagues today from different universities, but we all believe in that same ethos. So that's a little bit about the Institute of Policing at Staffordshire. Moving on to the next slide then. Okay, so this might be your perception of what a university is, and believe me, there are still universities that rely very much on this kind of learning environment. There is a place for this kind of learning, and we're going to touch on this a little bit. John Coxted spoke about this earlier, but very much this kind of idea that the lecturer is at the centre of all of your learning, and you will be taught whether you like it or not, and almost by a process of osmosis and chalkboard equations, you're going to learn something. Dave touched on this earlier. That is a way of imparting knowledge, yes. It is a way of potentially engaging, depending upon the skill of the lecturer, and it's very much about you concentrating and soaking up all of that learning. So it does have its place, but is it the right methodology for 21st century police education? We talked earlier about the complexity of police education. Every force now, as part of Uplift, has access to Microsoft Teams. And yet, picking up on some of the issues we spoke about, culture, the functionality of that within each force is very different. We've developed a learning environment with the use of Microsoft Teams, so it's a one-stop shop for all of our learners. What it also allows is for flexibility and access to the people that are teaching, and putting all of the material in one place, so you don't have to go through many clicks to get through the university various different channels to find what you want. So we'll come on some of the detail of that in a few slides, but this means we can have a 24/7 virtual learning environment. You don't have to go into another system to learn. You are sharing information with each other, so it helps build virtual communities of practice. It helps to share learning, and peer-to-peer learning is one of the best ways of learning. And my job merely as a lecturer is just to ask you the questions. So whilst there are other methods of communicating, methods of learning available, we primarily use this method and then use it to try and engage you in a different way, and actually in an environment where you feel safe. And that's what we're looking to develop. So very much more these days, there is still face-to-face teaching. and that's not to be discounted, but a blended approach to teaching is often the best way. And in this sense, I often do meet students, but we don't need to do it. There's this kind of idea that you must be in one of those lecture theatres, or maybe sat behind a desk, being taught at rather than learning with. So let's move on then about some of the science behind that. The first bit, if you think back to those slides around the chalkboard and the esteemed lecturer at the middle of that kind of theatre, if you like, that's something that's called a pedagogy. And generally it's accepted. It's the way that we teach children. We get them all in one place, and those children, those learners, are wholly dependent upon the learning that's being shared by their teacher, by their lecturer. So it is a way of imparting knowledge. And again, Dave talked about that earlier. And you can soak up that knowledge, and you have then learned something, or you've at least had the potential to learn something. Where we're aiming more towards is these two last terms, andragogy, and that's facilitating learning for arguably adults, people who already have some experience of life, or perhaps building on their knowledge, and are starting now to investigate things for themselves. And in amongst the audience, and certainly audience we've spoken to, we have, for example, skilled detectives who are PIP 2 qualified. You are already working in an andragogy. You should be learning as you go along. You're picking up different pieces of evidence, and you are putting a case together. As John Cox had suggested earlier, there's a real analogy there with what you do in higher education. And the final bit there is heutagogy, and that's the management of learning through self-managed learners. And what we're trying to do really in how we've developed the course, which comes very much from my own experience of getting a master's degree, is really trying to get you beyond just having knowledge. We're getting you to try and find out what else is out there, and then teaching you through self-reflection, teaching yourself to become self-directed learners. So it's not all about the teacher. The teacher is there to facilitate your learning, not to tell you what's right or wrong. So Dave's question about the APP earlier, it's a good source of knowledge, but it won't give you all of the answers. And when you get to the final level, you are then learning for yourself and sharing that learning. And that's really what we've done. To develop our courses. So this is how we're working. Every course, every university course, every teaching course, including the ones from the College of Policing, will have elements of some of this. And there's a whole world of evidence and research to support that in every different guise. So these are some of the details, and so I've said that I used my own experience this. I've got a master's degree in leadership and management, and this century, I hasten to add, it's not like something 1,000 years ago. And what I had to do to go on my course was go to do some block learning. So 3 days at a very good university with some fantastic tutors, but it was 12 hours a day in one of those lecture theatres. Happily, it had some good facilities, so I could spend some time in the evening after being sat in 12 hours of lectures, having a drink. It was also very expensive compared to a student union bar, I remember. And then I was given an assignment, and that assignment was something then that I had to try and figure out for myself, because there was no access to any of the tutors. And then I kind of worked this out, having had no prior knowledge or experience of higher education for myself. And at this point, I was kind of a 40-something chief inspector. I'd managed to kind of get to those dizzy heights without doing any academic work. And somehow I got through and I passed, and I actually got a good master's degree. And so the question earlier, Dave said, well, do you need a degree? No, you don't. But as a 40-something operationally sound, competent senior officer, if you like, it gave me more confidence than I've ever had in the whole of the rest of my life up until that point. It gave me that ability to think for myself, And I feel there was like a light bulb moment during that course where I realised I didn't have to agree with what other people more senior to me, whereas the kind of superior officers did. I could do that for myself, and better than that, with the knowledge and skills I'd developed, I was able to apply it in the workplace, and I could sit in meetings and predict what some of my peers were going to tell me before they actually said it. So I already had an answer before they'd even asked the question. I may say I was kind of being smart. It's just that it helped me because my confidence was I knew the answer to the question before they asked it. So everything about our courses has been based on my experience and then the availability of technology, which I think we all agree that post-COVID has become more prevalent. So what do? All of our delivery is online. So this idea of bringing the university to you can learn in an environment where you feel comfortable. One of our graduating students was a mum of 2 young boys, and she used to use this as her time. So she'd get her partner to look after the kids, and she would stay in the bedroom and lock the door so she could study and join our lectures, which was great. And we had another guy. He's not quite finished, but he submitted his dissertation this month, and in the middle of one of our lecturers, the words came from his microphone, "Daddy, I need a poo," which just shows how normal and how people kind of put themselves in the right environment. Obviously there was a laughing point about that, but we live busy lives in the 21st century, and we have to try and adapt. And so how you adapt to your learning is something personal for you. But the way we've set the course up is that if you can't be there because you need to take your kids to bed or you need to give them the tea, everything's recorded for you so you can come back to it afterwards. And rather than being left alone, as a lecturer until the essays come in, you're in a good position then to be able to get in contact with me if you need, directly through Teams. And you can do your learning in stages. Access to the library is all online. We also show a link to the College of Policing library. If you're a cop, you can join that for free. We give you a lot of the reading material that you're going to need for the lecturers. And if all you did was read that material, understand it, and then follow the assignments that we set, then you're going to pass. If you want to extend your learning and really push yourself, you're going to get a good pass. And so all of that material, lectures are available for you throughout the whole of your studies, and access to lecturers to sell. So why do this then? And I know there's been a question raised about the Masters in Investigation that we lead. Well, the reason we do this is because it advances your knowledge. And I've given my own kind of personal experience of that. We want you to challenge assumptions, because if you don't, we'll always do the same thing. And I would argue the culture of policing, societal kind of culture sometimes says, well, we like doing the same thing because it's easy. We think this improves your communication and thinking skills, and that is evidenced by some of the outcomes and some of the feedback we get from students. It is building on your professional commitment, but it's actually looking at your personal commitment as well. Doing a degree says something about you. We want you to extend your community of practice. So, my topic area is leadership. So we want people to learn from each other's leadership, but it's all about your practice. Leadership is such a contested subject, for example, that there's no right or wrong answers to it. But we want you to be able to understand what it means for you and the people that you're leading. We talked about this a lot this morning. We independently assessed accreditation. Gary and I were having a discussion over lunch, and we feel that in many ways, some of the police courses that are available that are led with support from higher education are probably the most independently assessed courses anywhere in policing. And it's good that specialist skills are have licensed outcomes from the college. But that is always internal assessment. The danger there is you end up with groupthink. And yeah, it does lead to a transferable qualification that you can take outside of policing if you want. So we've designed the courses that we deliver, but I know most courses are very similar aspirations as well, to look at some of these benefits. Okay, so I'm not going to talk this through. I'm just going to let you read that, really. These are all direct quotes from students who are using our courses. So I'll just leave you for 30 seconds just to look at that. Thank you, Paul. You'll do very well in your next module.
It's all about the problem.
Yes, it is about the provenance. So these are all come from students, and you know, it's the best way really to share that message, isn't it? Because obviously the risk is I get the risk is that, well, I've got a vested interest. Well, I have, but I don't have to work at Staffordshire University. I just genuinely believe that policing deserves the best possible education that it can. And in my subject area of leadership, I think we all agree, including Sir Andy this morning, really, that there's much more work that needs to be done. We're making steps towards that, but there's so much more to be done, and there is evidence obviously to support that, simply by reading one document, the case review. Yeah, this is what our students say, and we have got some successes in our students, which I'll come to in a minute. What Paul has asked is that, I think we're all going to do this, we all offer courses that might sound similar, but they are actually different in terms of the way that they're delivered, the level that they're delivered at, and the learning outcomes. Some are going to be similar, some are going to be slightly different. But the course at the top there is the course where I'm the course leader. Yeah, there is a plug. You've got about another 10-15 days to sign up for that. We have several cohorts now that are running on that. The latest cohort will start in their induction on the 25th of September. And so if you want to join that course, please follow that link. If you want to speak to me, I think my contact details will be available. And you can always find me on LinkedIn if you want to find out what I've done. The other course is a course in investigation practice. I am the current course leader for that because I've used my experience to get this one validated, to marketing, and we've got a very healthy intake now for September, sufficient numbers for a full-time intake as well, and we've got people signed up to January. So that course is very popular. And again, if you want more details on that, please follow that link. It will all follow the same andragogy, and the idea is that we're developing a course both for policing, which is why we've not put policing in it. Investigation practice includes policing, but equally for the private sector, other members of the public sector. I think there was a question about this. We've got people from world-renowned consultants who do forensic investigation audits. They're interested in this. We've got some public authorities. You know, there's around about 100 different public investigating authorities just in the UK. And then, yeah, we've got cops. Also talking a little bit about ARPEL and APEL. We heard about that several times this morning. Whilst we haven't mapped these courses out yet, that's really the next stage for me. And we're going to be mapping out specific college license courses to enhance learning. But the basic entry level into most higher education degrees is really you need a 2-2 degree or experiential learning elsewhere. So as a course leader, I assess that. I've signed up somebody for the leadership course this morning who's a constable, so a leader. Well, this college are now agreeing that you are a leader as a constable, and I've taken into account her specialist knowledge around around intelligence. So I've approved that by way of RPEL. And similarly, we've said for the investigation, the baseline is PIP 2, but with similar portfolio of evidence, we would accept an application for that as well. So we are already using this. Part of my job and the university is now mapping that out to specific courses. The other thing, that all of the modules for these courses can be delivered as standalone modules, either accredited or not, and that's another piece of work that we're going to be doing. So we've got enough to talk about there, but I'll just also signpost then courses that will be available in January or later on this year: a Masters in Crisis and Disaster Management, more perhaps towards protective security and so on and so forth. So off the back of the Manchester Arena attack, and a Masters in Police Research. A lot of people sign up to the Cambridge Masters in Research, which is excellent. It's also quite expensive, and whilst it's lovely to have Cambridge there, this is about our university is about practice, so that's really where we're aiming this. And then we have this year I validated an undergraduate serious and complex crime investigator degree apprenticeship. So we are reaching out to employers for expressions of interest for delivery potentially in 2025, and that has been mapped out against the PIP process as well. So yeah, this is what we're offering currently, but if somebody, an organisation wants to contact us, say, well, can you deliver something bespoke, we can do that as well. These are some of the questions. I'm going to go over these because I think they'll be covered by speakers later on, but I'll just go over this because I know these are questions that I get asked. Not academic enough. If you're working in policing as a constable or above, or a police staff member, then you are. Will you have to go to university every week? No. Is it just about getting promoted? Definitely not. There's a horizontal and vertical axis to developing policed in. Police staff members, yes please. There are even fewer career pathways for police staff members. Will you have the time to study? Well, I can tell you the indicative time and the minimum amount of time that we think, and the cost. Well, we've talked about that already. Again, if you look on the links that I've provided, we can answer some of those questions for you as well. And yeah, this could be you. So these guys all graduated a couple of months ago. Fantastic ceremony, mixture of cops and police staff members as well. And these are some of the people, to pick up Paul's challenge earlier, who made some of those comments, Paul, about the courses. Graduating is great for you as an individual, but equally it's good for your family as well. And this was me and my throne.
Thanks very much, Jim. One thing you didn't mention, and I think I should plug it myself, I'm doing a master's degree in police leadership myself, halfway through, and I'm surprised at just how doable the degree is. I was absolutely terrified going into it. 25 years of policing, I've not been studying for some time. And even then, my initial degree that I did, it was a degree in useless studies from a useless university. I did not think I was going to do well at all. But what I found remarkable is you're doing the work anyway. It's just about fine-tuning what you're doing. The bit I found most difficult was learning how to reference things and write essays the way that you're expected to do, but it didn't take long to learn that. And I find it thoroughly enjoyable. So yeah, it's entirely doable. You wouldn't believe just how easy it is to access these things and to get these things done. So I really would encourage you to do it. I'm now going to pass over to Professor Gary Shaw, who's come down from Sunderland University today. He's going to talk about the importance of continuous professional development in policing and look at some of the courses and that's on offer from Sunderland University. So over to you.
Thank you. As you'll see from the presentation, I'd just like to try and keep things simple. So it's been a long day for everybody, including myself. So I think I just want to focus on some key areas and then around CPD. So this is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at from the organisational point of view the importance of CPD, from the individual side, the importance of that, and then we'll look at some of the CPD opportunities, because as Jim was saying, that a lot of the universities are doing similar but different things. My background is in investigation, so I'm going to focus on the investigative CPD side of it, from PIP 1 through to PIP 2 in a moment. But the importance of CPD, of continuous professional development, people have talked about it for a long time over the years. But just to put some more, I suppose, meat on the bones, make it more tangible for yourselves, is this thing around currency. I mean, the title of today is about exchanging currency, but it's important that you keep up to speed with what's current. Things are changing all the time from an investigative or a policing point of view. So it's important that we know exactly what's going on. And often the people we have who are students coming on the programs obviously from policing, but from other investigative bodies as well, including the military, they talk about how they've never had any input for a long time. And so therefore they're missing out, and they're using some of the phrases, some of the approaches, which actually are well out of date. So that causes a problem within itself. Also, CPD is increasing your knowledge, isn't it? From an organisational point of view, it's important, isn't it, that the people, the workforce, are very knowledgeable, because certainly in the art of investigation, it's really important that people understand what the legislation is, any stated cases that are out there. So again, where do people get that from? So as Paul was saying earlier, the importance of organisations investing in people, because they're going to go there and have an impact on the reputation, credibility of the force that they're working for. Again, aligned to the PIP programme, the PIP at the right at the very beginning has got, the professionalisation of things. So if we're going to call ourselves professionals, we need to keep current all the time. I've been involved in a lot of investigations over the years. My role was as National Interview Advisor, going out and supporting forces for a lot of years. And what I found when we're looking at professions, the professions, let's say in a medical setting, as example, if they weren't current, some of the practices that we're using were well out of date, which caused them a problem in an investigation. So from a professional point of view, if it's really important that we just keep current. And what it's all about, all of us sitting here like today, have all been involved in policing for a number of years. It's important that we give a good quality service out there to people. That's what we're all here for. It's not about CPD for the sake of it. It's about making sure that we give the highest quality of service to the public out of there. And the way we do that is keeping up to speed with what's expected. From a lot of experiences leaving the job now, and from an organisational point of view, people have been looking at how can they share their experience. How can they make sure that people, some forces are doing some drastic measures, aren't they, taking people out of specialist areas and put them back into frontline policing, and there's pros and cons around all of that, I'm sure. But this sharing of experiences, so when you get people together, whether it's online or whether it's like face-to-face in classrooms, or whether it's in presentations or group work or conferences, those sharing experiences are really important. And having that opportunity to see it all around the country, issues that are happening in the south, similar issues happens in the north or in the Midlands. So it's trying to make sure that we share all of that. So for me, tangible CPD, this is the whole idea, isn't just about let's put a thing on because it looks good. It's about really making a difference to yourselves. And you've taken the time to come on to this seminar today and listen to people talking through their experiences, as Jim's just explained his experience in the impact of CPD for himself. So it's really important. And if you're going to be, as we all are, in whatever, but certainly policing now is under more scrutiny for me than it ever has been, if people are going to scrutinise you and look at how you've approached a task, how you've looked at, as was mentioned earlier, putting into practice the national decision-making model, you've got to be right at the top of your game, because and you'll be under so much scrutiny, whether it's frontline policing, whether it's like going to a scene of an investigation, or whether it's somebody, an SIO, setting away strategies. We're all under scrutiny. So the better we are, the more current we are, the more knowledgeable we are, it can only benefit yourselves and the organisation, frankly. Oops. From an individual point of view, I see it, I'm going to go into the programmes we get involved with from the University of Sunderland point of view, but I see people coming in lacking a little bit of confidence. It's been alluded to today, the amount of confidence people come from it, from the fact that they now can understand in more depth what they've been involved with for a number of years. So just it gives that confidence side, the confidence that that there's some of those doubts that that Jim was saying there on those quotes, some of the fact that people doubted themselves, but to come out of having a degree at the end of it. I've seen people who've come on to the undergrad programmes like the LLB, which I'll explain in a minute, come on with no previous experience at all in academia, but come up with some fantastic results, all down to the fact that they have put the effort in and the confidence that they can give. It's heartwarming. Also, a bit, I suppose, the reassurance side of it, and I think it was John talked about this earlier on, about where you pitch yourself in all those different levels, and the reassurance that, hang on a minute, I actually know this stuff and I know more than I thought I did. So when I'm researching me project, or whether I'm discussing some issues within the classroom or online, I really know what I'm talking about. Which again, it's a good thing. I often say to people when I do some classroom work around with forces, around the diplomas, which again I'll mention in a minute. And I say to people, look, if all this does is reassure you you're doing the right thing on a daily basis, that's fantastic. And if you learn a little bit more, well, that's even better, isn't it? So the reassurance side, and sometimes would downplay how important we are ourselves. And this is around self-development too. I only squeeze it in, but I'd like to put an investigative mindset in there, because the importance of developing how you think as an investigator, because all of us, no matter where you work, you're all investigators. You investigate. It could be investigate something as simple as some lost property, or if we do that anymore, so probably give me age there away. But up to now, how we investigate serious offences and all the steps in between, whether investigate a traffic incident or whatever it is, we're all investigators, missing from homes. So develop how we think is really, really important. Likewise is reflecting, proper reflection on what you've done on a daily basis. Often a lot of us do this. I'll be reflecting on a day's proceedings later on, but it's really the learning that comes from it. And I think, I can't remember, it was, I think, probably discussion out over lunch in respect of lessons learned. People say, oh, we've learned the lessons, but actually have we really? And have we really thought through what the issues are? And if something's gone wrong in a scenario, or even if something's gone right, to really reflect on it, to get the best out of it. So the idea of continuous professional development to develop ourselves, I think, is crucial. But also, and it was at least in the organisation side, the people that you invest in yourselves if we're going down the pathway of the undergrad or postgrad or diploma, it's undergrad work, there's an acknowledgement, there should be an acknowledgement from other people that you've put the effort in. You've put the effort in from the work, you've all got busy massively, and I think policing's more busy with lack of resources than ever has been, and you're putting all the effort in, and sometimes, well, obviously, we all around the table want forces to invest in you, but at times you're going to have to invest in yourselves. So there should be that acknowledgement, shouldn't there? There should be that acknowledgement. This isn't, just for, and we'll talk about for when you leave the job, because that's quite important as well. But it's important that people acknowledge what you're doing within the service. So I'm not saying it should be mandatory that, if you do this, you should always get promoted, but it's got to be a factor within it. And I remember that does get taken into account. So acknowledgement for other people. And certainly when you leave the job, acknowledgement from other organisations when you might apply for other jobs in other sectors, the acknowledgement you've put the effort in to do it. And again, the recognition. It's nice to be recognised, isn't it? It's nice to be recognised for all the work that you've done. I've had some nice accolades over the years for acknowledgement of the work that I've put in for it. And it's better than saying, look, there's a tenner, there's a fiver, isn't it? It's the recognition that it which breeds into your confidence and everything else. So I think the recognition by an academic award around what you've done, it can't beat it. Because people often say to me, what's in it for me? If I'm going to invest in, it's all of this. It's all of this. But the sense of achievement, it's the sense of achievement of you, and summed up great, I thought, by Dave's question early on, the first question he asked of John, in respect of what's it mean, and how do people achieve this, and how do they go about it. But that sense of achievement that you get from researching a project, something that which you thought you'd never had the opportunity or the inclination to do, but then you start looking at it because that's a project being tasked with by any of the universities you choose to go with. That sense of achievement at the end when people say, what a cracking piece of work, and you've uncovered things. If you think about what the College of Policing we're talking about evidence-based, you find the things that's going on. I've seen some fantastic results for people who have come on and start to investigate a little bit in force, what's going on, maybe it's in the custody area, what's going on in the frontline policing. And the results have been fantastic and fed back into the organisation as well. So it's really important. Often over the years, people have talked about like CPD, it gets trotted out all the time. But I think what the universities, some of them, not all of them, but some of them are trying to do is to make it real. This is what CPD looks like. So Jim's just gone through the programme from his point of view. I'll talk it from our point of view, from the University of Sunderland. I'll throw this in as well. We've got a campus in London, by the way, so it's not just in the northeast, although it's over in the northeast. It's certainly have a London campus. One in Hong Kong, it's quite a bit far to go, by the way. So all of the programmes that I've been involved with since 2006. So the recognition of prior learning and experience isn't a new thing. We had it in 2006. PIP came in 2003, and I remember the university approaching me to talk about how could we think about developing some programs on investigation, and it's all built around PIP, right? And it's all built on top of PIP. So the PIP 1 and PIP 2, which I'll explain in a second. But we've been recognised since 2006. And I suppose in some ways we've gone under the radar until because I had a few other jobs to do over the years. I'd just given them a bit of a hand until 2018 when I went to the university in full time and started to push most of these things. What we have now, and I'm going to go into more depth in a minute, but diplomas and advanced diplomas. And I'll explain the levels a little bit in simple terms so it keeps me right. But what they focus on, and I've just talked about there before, your knowledge, increasing your knowledge in whichever diploma or advanced diploma you're involved with, but also how the importance of reflection. and the importance of, I think there was mentioned one of the questions earlier on, the importance of don't have cognitive bias in an investigation, and the importance of developing a proper mindset. So really practical, applied areas based around case studies that you're doing on a daily basis. Because we've tried to develop this career pathway, and all the people who are involved with me at the university are all people who've been in the job, like in policing, heavily in investigation, and all of them have been involved on a national and sometimes international basis around giving advice on investigations and conducting investigations. So we have a BA applied investigation, and that really talks about extending your professional competence, but also a work-based research project, because that's quite important, the work-based project side of it, because again, it ticks the boxes from the College of Policing side. The MA, we have an MA in investigative management. They're the key areas around there, around leadership and decision making, but also with a work-based research project, because that it's important, because the projects are basically selected by yourselves and based around obviously your experiences in the workplace. Just very quickly, I'll put all these slides up here. I'll go back to that one so it doesn't go. See if I can get it. Right. Just a little bit meat on the bones. PIP 1, we already give a recognised prior learning for at level 4. So, which means is we do some diplomas or an investigative interview at level 5. Then, if you're at PIP 2, again, we recognise that the level you're operating is like level 5, which is in essence like 2 years of a degree side of it. But you come on and if you want to do, we have advanced diplomas around those areas there, and investigative interview and family liaison and in the RASO world. And the BA we run is applied level 6 a year, and you come out, so you get the 2 years given to you for being PIP 2, so you come on to the final stage, so which is like 18 months to do. And if you come through the diploma route, you only have to do so much of the BA applied investigation. Similarly, from the MA, if you're at PIP level 3, far as we're concerned, that equates to level 6 already, so there's no requirement for a previous academic qualification, as a lot of universities say you have to do to get onto an MA. And I think, but also PIP 2 can come on it. That's me. Really, I wanted to focus on the CPD. If you want any more information that's there for you, I don't want to go into all the costs. That's not the time to do it. But if you're interested in any of that we've thought about, just there's some links for you.
Thank you, Gary. And it's probably worth clarifying, if you do qualify with PIP 2 to come in on the 3rd year, you only pay for the 3rd year of that course, so that significantly reduces the cost.
Absolutely. And if you do the diploma, Paul, you pay, before you do that, you actually pay less as well.
And just out of interest, how much roughly would it cost to do a degree, or if only the final year of the degree? To
do the final year of the degree is £4,450. If you do it after you've done the diploma, it's £2,960.
Far more manageable. Thank you very much. We'll go straight to our next speaker now. I think we're going off to Liverpool now to speak to Dr. Sean Bell from the Open University. He's going to talk about alternative learning options. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you. I'm a bit of the new boy in the block here compared to the 2 previous speakers. So hats off to both of them for their long-standing career in academia. I retired in 2015. I suppose I've come for 9 years now. I just want to talk you through what my experience has been and what drove me towards HE, and how I ended up as Dr. Sean Bell, which I still find surprising, because our colleagues before have been speaking about confidence, and I still have what's called imposter syndrome. I still think of myself as a retired cop in academia, as opposed to a academic, I suppose, as my peers that spoke previously would probably describe themselves. Practitioners with academic interests as well, academic experience. So this is called HE and Me. It's more about HE than it is about me, but I'll take you through that. There's 14 slides. I won't dwell on most of them because I just want to point out some key phrases from each of the more points that will be relevant, and it'll give you more time for your questions at the end. So, me, if you can move on to the next slide, please, Lisa. I left school at 18 with 1 A-level. I wanted to do a degree. 1 A-level wouldn't allow you to do a degree, so I did a HND at Liverpool Poly. The reason that's on that slide there is in 1980s, when I left sixth form, only between 5 and 10% of people went on to do degrees. So even the fact that I did a HND and went to Liverpool Polytechnic full-time for 3 years on a sandwich course made me stand out from my peers locally where I lived at the time. Not necessarily the people I went to school with, because quite a few of us went on to do degrees, but I never did a degree when I left school. 21, I became a site engineer on building sites, construction sites, when things really weren't good in building. I wanted to do something to do with the public, and I joined the police at the age of 23. I was a constable for 16 years, and on promotion to sergeant, I became a Fed rep. And this is probably where starts my academia, or why I ended up at academia came into place. My last 3 years, I was full-time Dep Secretary at Merseyside Police Branch Board. And I had my day-to-day job was basically police pension and injury awards. And I got a real beer in my bonnet about mental ill health and how bobbies were treated in the service, attitudes to our colleagues with mental health issues, and the stigma surrounding it. And thankfully, my time in academia has allowed me to do something about that. I've had several papers successfully published on the topic. I speak regularly to student police officers, and it's part of what I do. And I've helped others along the route to be able to talk about how they can use their research and implement that into policing. But I'll touch on that on the next few slides. So could the next slide, please, Lisa? Now, the Erasmus and Leonardo, that was part of what was Britain's membership in the EU, and allowed for funding for lots and lots of various different training, learning and academic support for people in the EU. Unfortunately, with Brexit, a lot of this has been removed now. But in 2008, Liverpool became European Capital of Culture, and I had the honour, really, I suppose, of being an inspector on that programme, and I had a lot of responsibility for the force events. One which was under Hogan Howe, Bernard Hogan Howe, before he became a Sir, was to put together an exchange programme with officers across Europe, which we did. And why I've highlighted these on here on the slide is this, and this is a point about when you start thinking, or if you do start thinking about going into HE, or what opportunities are available to you. When we put out the advert to the force saying who'd like to go to Europe on a freebie for 6 days, all expenses paid, all you had to do as part of the application was a 200-word application about the country you wanted to go to, the police in the country, and a few phrases in the appropriate language. And a member of police staff said to me, there's no point in applying because it's all stitched up. Well, to be honest, we had to go trawling for people to actually go on these exchanges because we didn't have enough applications. And out of a force at that time, including police officers and police staff, was probably about 7,000 in total. And we didn't have enough for the first programme without going trawling people. So what I'm saying to you is, if you think there's an opportunity out there, have a go at it. It may be competitive, it may not be, but even if it's competitive, there might not be enough applicants in the first place. So give it a go. You've got nothing to lose, especially if you're asking for funding or you're looking for places on various different courses or that has been offered by the college or your own force or anybody else. If you don't give it a go, you ain't got it. You're not going to go, are you? But there's lots to be taken advantage of if you do. One of the things I found about, on a slightly different note, I found about academia is once I started studying, I started seeing policing in a different light. I just didn't see it as an insider. I saw it from outside the organisation and the impact policing has on the wider community. We all know that we have an impact on the community, but once you start to study the subject, you start seeing from a different light and from other people's angles. This Erasmus Leonardo programme did the same for our bobbies. And we've all heard the phrase that the job's effed and whatever else. What my colleagues in Merseyside at the time who did travel abroad found out that actually Merseyside was doing a very good job and that they came back very proud of the organisation, far more proud than they went away. And I think, again, once you start looking at and studying police and you realise again, and many colleagues have referred to this earlier on, we're doing a far better job than certainly the media and a lot of politicians credit us for. And one route to get that next step up is about the professionalisation of policing, and I do think HE angle from that will improve that. Again, we were in this big police family, and they say these bobbies went abroad and they found out that, do you know what, policing is not that dissimilar elsewhere. But what they did find is that things to be learned across speaking together with colleagues from different countries from their visits. And the other good bit was we had bobbies, or we had cops come from across Europe back into Merseyside, and they were telling tales. Again, around this time, and I had not much knowledge of policing outside of, well, even Merseyside, I suppose, at that time. The colleagues who were coming over from Germany and some of the Scandinavian forces, their tiered entry depended on the academic qualifications of those officers. And of course, that was anathema here at that time in the UK. You know, there was little or no talk about degrees. It had always been on the horizon, but nobody said you would ever need a degree to be policing at the time. It was always discussed, but it wasn't there. And this was actually happening across Europe. So, you know, they were surprised to find that you'd start as a constable, you could work your way up to the chief constable without getting a master's or a PhD even. Okay, thanks, Lisa. My origins to HE, if you'd have said to me in 2008 I would end up with a PhD 10, 12 years later, I just wouldn't have believed it. And this is what happened to me, and this is what I'm saying about taking opportunities, folks, if they come your way, or even to go looking for them. In 2010, we had the start of austerity. We ran out of police recruits. The force had already signed up to John Moores as part of what was ever entry route into policing in 2010, that the recruits had to do a foundation degree. That was open to us as police officers, and I took that opportunity, and it sort of whetted my appetite, gave me a feel for studying, which I quite enjoy. I did quite well out of it. I actually formed a friendship group with some of my fellow students then who are still friends today, and we went through and did our BA together. Thankfully, again, that came free because John Moores were running a pilot for what would become the PCDA professional policing degree, and between the force and John Moores, that was offered to 2 cohorts for free, I think, in 2010 and then again in 2011. Some of those people who are on those cohorts now working as lecturers at the Open University, teaching officers on the PCDA and other qualifications that we deliver at the OU for North Yorkshire Police. 2014, by that time, I got my teeth into being a full-time exec member dealing with ill health and injury, and I said that's where I got the bee in my bonnet about attitudes to and stigma of mental health in policing, and I undertook the full-time master's degree. Again, with a conversation, a few doors open for me. I applied for a bursary, and basically John Moores paid for my study for my master's degree. I did that full time in a year while I was still working with the working for the Federation, working for Merseyside Police before I retired. Again, I was looking up for an opportunity to come up, and I found myself a little niche in policing and research when it came to mental health, and put a proposal to what was then the Humanities Department at John Moores about potential PhD, and they gave me a bursary where they gave me £14,000 a year, plus they paid my fees for the PhD, and I had to give them back 6 hours teaching a month. After that, I got a full-time job at John Moores, and I came to the OU a couple of years ago. Thanks, Lisa. I'm pleased to say in that time, I've published 3 or 4 papers. I've assisted others to do so, so that the first 3 on that slide there, Break a Leg, Suspicious Minds and Swing the Lead, they're all mine around mental health in policing. It's a crutch with Patsy there. She was a PhD researcher at Liverpool University who contacted the Federation office asking if anybody would like to put an input onto her piece of research, and I ended up being an advisor on her PhD. And the last one there around maternity leave, that happened as a result of Kendall getting in touch with me on LinkedIn saying she was interested in doing some research around maternity leave and policing. And anyway, it's ended up as a massive piece of research that Kendall, Fran and Keeley have just come back from the Women's Policing Conference in Chicago where that's been presented, and I'm really proud of that. And that started from nothing. Again, that's somebody taking a punt on LinkedIn to speak to me, and I'll mention later on where Kendall's now got she's now working at the Open University. And my current research as it stands now is I'm looking at changing minds. That's about police officers' mental health, carrying on my own area. Came out of my own studies and a contact from Karina Riley, who's one of the editors at Policing Insight. We got some research underway about the impact of the loss to canteens and shared spaces affecting police wellbeing. We've had over 3,000 responses from that across the UK with the help of PFEW and the federations in the other UK countries, and that's well underway. And one we started earlier, towards the end of last year, was the impact on divorce and separation, police wellbeing. And that is massively under research. As a matter of fact, I don't think anything's been done on that prior. We hope to break some ground on that. Next one, please, Lisa. Teaching, I'll be very brief on this one, folks. I've taught across on BA Policing, Professional Policing degree, BSc Honours, PCDA and Masters in Policing. I think here's where we've got to get smarter. The conversation there goes, you're a lecturer in policing. Is that criminology? No, it's policing. And me, the FFS, you know what that means. The issue here is I don't think we do enough promoting policing and the fact that it's a specialism in its own right. It was really good to hear Andy Marsh say this morning, there's actually 200 specialisms within policing. We don't crow enough about this sort of thing. We don't shout enough about it. And one way of doing this, I think, again, is through the HE route, is that the more dedicated degrees there are, and the more there is in research and academia centred around policing, as opposed to being bolt on to other disciplines, then the better we'll do for the organisation. Thanks, Lisa. I'll leave these slides for you folks. I'm not going to go through all these. A lot has been covered now, why cops are going into higher education. So we'll leave that one. And motivations of policing degree. If we could go to slide 11, please, with the diagram, please, Lisa. Again, much of you have heard here, but I think one that's very important there is the second from bottom on the left-hand side, unfinished business. I think there's a cohort of us here within policing that probably left, school before the early 90s to mid 90s, when New Labour had opened up the doors for degrees across. They wanted 50% of the population to have a degree. There's quite a cohort within policing who had those opportunities, and I think now is ripe for it. Certainly, if you want to open more doors when you retire, a degree helps. I think having a background in policing, and my experience from all my peers who have retired, they've all ended up at jobs they wanted in areas where they wanted and doing very well, thank you. But that policing degree or a degree elsewhere will help you on your way, and it'll certainly open other doors. Next slide, please. Those of you who've got topics in your mind, I'd just say this to you. And again, Andy Marsh alluded to this morning, there's a plethora of areas around policing that haven't been researched. One thing is this insider outsider bit. I did well with my PhD because I had the backing of the national PFEW to send my survey out nationally. They're less inclined to do it now because they do a lot more of their own surveys, but they will support academics if they think it's relevant to the membership. And they have done with our canteen research that's being undertaken at the moment. But it's ripe for research because policing's under-researched. And the fact that you are cops, you will open doors into police communities that others researchers won't get. And I'm speaking to a colleague at Chester University, and she's doing her PhD at the moment, and albeit it's around trauma and policing, and she's finding it really difficult to open doors, albeit she's got some links to policing, but she hasn't got that tag that she's been a cop or a member of police staff when she tries to open these doors. So if you're looking at research, that there really is a big industry to open up out there for yourself. And next things, please, Lisa. Just very briefly, the ones I've highlighted there. There's bursaries and secondments. We have part of the Open University Police Department at the Centre for Police Research and Learning. We have secondments from each of the 24 member police forces. Kendall Wright, Fran Wright and Bruce Boxton. They've been there since I've been there. Kendall has become full-time at the OU since from Merseyside. Fran came on a secondment and is now on a career break from Lancashire Constabulary, and Bruce came from the National Crime Agency. So I'm going back against that Leonardo slide, folks. You know, if there's an opening there, you see it's there, it's worth giving it a go, because these people have changed their career. Don't overlook things like LinkedIn. Paul Tier, he contacted me through LinkedIn, because I'm always putting out there, you know, if you want to speak about higher education and being I'm 62 now. If you want to see what it's like for an older person, I started my studies again, late 40s, early 50s. I'm always willing to speak to people. Paul contacted me. He's just gained a bursary for a PhD. Well, I won't go into it now, but he has done through one of his local universities. And again, that came from a conversation through LinkedIn. So don't be afraid to talk to people. I think anybody who's got a policing background and is HE would be more than happy to share their experiences and speak to both. And last but not least, please, Lisa. I'm not going to go through this, folks. We don't have degrees, specific degrees for policing for members of the public at the moment. We are working on other ways to do that. We tend to deliver for PCSOs, PCDA, DHEP, etc. for North Yorkshire Police. Obviously, if anybody else wants to contact us about how we deliver our training, I'm more than happy to speak about forces look for changing to a new provider. But what I will say to you is, if you want to see what we can do, and the OU's been around for 50 years delivering this blended distance learning. Those of you in my age group remember when it used to come on BBC Two at 12 o'clock when the telly used to close down. The OU is very good at delivering blended learning. You don't need to do it 9 to 5. You don't need to do it Monday to Friday. You can do it in your own time. It's all available in various different formats, whether it be on your phone, on a PC, or on your laptop. And if you want to give it a go, the OU, as part of their charter, have to give away 10% of all our learning resources, and you'll find that an open learning, it's called. There's lots and lots of things there: sociology, psychology, nursing, teaching. Some of it's from the MBA. There's a plethora of stuff on there. But if you want to see how the OU delivers learning and you want to have a little go and dip your toe in the water, there's the link for you, folks. If you want to speak about policing, well, there's my contact details if anyone wants to speak to me. And I think you've had enough for me. You're better off listening to the panel now. Thanks very much for listening.
Not sure. On speaker now. Thank you. Before I'm going to move, we have scheduled in a short break before we take some questions, but I think we'll just skip over that and go straight to questions. But before I do, I just wanted a couple of things to drop into your chat bar. We have another seminar on the 19th of September where Mel Warnes, who's Secretary of the Detective Forum, will be speaking to Deputy Chief Carlos Ortiz from the New York Police Department. He's going to talk about how he cured all the problems in New York and how we might be able to do some similar stuff over here in the UK. So that'd be worth diving into. That link should be dropping in soon. If it doesn't, because you haven't got the chat bar, then just do a search on PFEW events and you'll find a link to it. There's also going to be a QR code that will be made available. If you want to click on that and just give us some feedback on what you think of today's events, that'd be really helpful, because that will help drive how we do future events from here on. We've still got everyone's present, so we'll just quickly go back to Dave Bamber now. He's going to if there's any questions, put them to the panel.
Yeah, Sean, thanks for that. You mentioned about transitioning out the job. You said about people who've been able to move into careers afterwards and doing the things that they want to do. It is a struggle moving out of the job sometimes, isn't it? Stopping being a police officer. Do you think HE qualifications, all of that, assists at all?
I never fail to be missed by what ex-colleagues do. You know, there's one fella I know from locally here. He ended up as Cilla Black's dad on the stage. You know, the talent within policing is amazing, and you know the experiences we have, I think, will open many, many doors. What I think is, certainly for me, is that I don't think there's enough people looking at the research element when it comes to HE. They think more about the teaching side of things. But what I find is, when you apply, depending on what part of the organisation you want to go, the degree seems to open more doors. And that's all anecdotal. I haven't got statistics, but I certainly know, regardless of what happens, and listening to Andy Marsh again this morning, if we're going down the route whereby officers are going to have to recredit, they're going to have to prove they've got the CPD, and it's either going to come from FE or HE. I don't think forces have got the capability to do it. There's going to be a change, I think, in how police officers will have to look at their own development. And very much, I think the culture is the job should deliver it to me. I agree, because that's the way we'll get the best police officers, but I don't know if budgets will allow for the foreseeable future. So I think there'll be more ownerships from individuals, and I think HE is part of that delivery.
Okay, thanks for that, Sean. And Gary, CPD, your area, it seems to have become a big business. It seems to become something that people ask for, but I don't think people understand what CPD is. You just take us through a few thoughts.
Yeah, Dave. I mean, you're right. My experience over the last few years of developing these CPD programs for specialists, particularly, who really do some really complex jobs, they come and they're crying out for it. You know, it's not a question of having to force feed people with it. They're crying out for more and more because they want to end up and continue to do a professional job all the time. I think sometimes over the years people have had this CPD title up in the air when nobody's really sure what it looks like, and then I think it's more than just going and listening to people talking. I know people listen to us talking today, but it's more than going to just a conference. It's more than just going on and listening to people. And I think Paul talked about it earlier on about it's the learning, isn't it? It's the learning. So CPD, it shouldn't be like unattainable. It should be there all the time. It should be there.
And who decides what CPD is?
I think, again, the way in a minute, it's different organisations. I think each of I've often said that the tasks we're asking people to do, they should be trained up to that level to do it, which involves CPD as a matter of course. I think it was taught early on, wasn't it? I think it was Sandy this morning, wasn't he? He was talking about the firearms, how much they're regulated all of the time. So I think that the people who make the decision what CPD is, it's a difficult question, really, isn't it? Because the college setting the standards, but also it's dependent on what people are doing on a daily basis. And forces, as we know, have different approaches to different things. Some of them organisational models are different. So whatever if you're going to put, and it's happening more and more, I say, with PIP 1 officers, they deal with more and more PIP 2 type offences. It's going to be the sheep dip approach where everybody gets everything. It just needs to be bespoke to what people need to do the job that's asking people to do.
Jim, I'm going to come to you now. With regards to these degrees and CPD elements, you offer a whole range of bits and pieces of qualifications. Can you pick up more than one? Can you do 2, 3, 4 qualifications? Does it matter? Do you have to go on that progressive journey from level 3, level 4, level 5, or level 6? Or can you just amass in one area?
And I think this is where the environment's going to change, because if we're saying that the environment people are working and living in is complex, then universities, and I'm sure my colleagues will say the same, can be very constrained in the way that they're thinking. The way that our institute works is almost a satellite to the university. We have to follow their regulations because they're nationally recognised regulations. But how we deliver it, well, that's how I've been able to deliver, my own courses. And I think the other thing I'd add to what Gary and Sean have said is there's a P missing from CPD, and it's the personal element of that as well. I mean, we've all touched on it, I think, to some degree, because we've all shared our own experiences. But professional development, you can go through a life as a cop or a police staff member in policing, and you will get lots of technical CPD. But the bits that enhance the role and the person, well, that's a lot deeper than those kind of courses. And I think we've all said this, we've all experienced it ourselves. I certainly have. Is that I feel I was a far better cop, but I was a far better, wider thinking individual. Once I did the course, so it's like that cartoon light bulb moment for me.
And staying with yourself, Jim, does the conversations around policing's changed, the skills are different, the requirements are different in the organisation today than they were than you joined, I joined, we joined. Is that actually true though? Have policing skills altered fundamentally?
No, at the basic level, they've not. But we are dealing, we are seeing now cops dealing with things. And again, Gary's just talked about, we are seeing cops with very basic skills now being expected to deal with massively complex investigations. I mean, I've been an independent endpoint assessor. I assess assessors, and I see the evidence. And you got cops there who are doing a brilliant job with basic policing skills, but they're not being supported by the organisation. And I'd add to that. Why is it that the Federation has invited us here to talk about it? Why isn't it the NPCC? Because they are the employers, and they should be getting those officers to work in a safe environment. We're saying that we can add value to that, but actually the lead does need to come from from those organisations, because that's where people are using their basic policing skills. So how you recognise risk, how you communicate with people, how you learn from your mistakes, but they're not being allowed to learn from mistakes either. So it's potentially ticking time bomb for me.
Now, you ask a question of why is it the Federation who've invited you here today to talk? Paul, do you want to tell us?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to add regarding the fundamental principles of policing, there's still a need for cops to go and knock on doors and speak to people.
Yeah.
But policing has become far more complicated. There's no doubt. There's artificial intelligence, international fraud, and people committing crimes in other countries and affecting people in this country. It's really, really complicated. But fundamentally, you still need people to knock on doors and speak to people and understand when someone's not telling you the truth, when there's lines of inquiry to follow and things like that. And there's certain things you can't teach that sort of thing within a higher education environment. You need that experience of doing it day in and day out. I think it's kind of disappointing, really, that the Federation had to put this together, because this is really something that should be led by the college and forces. That they should be the ones investing in their staff, in their officers. They want their officers to be developing and becoming better and better and improving in performance, and that performance being recognised and satisfaction by the public. And they need to be the ones investing in this. I'm putting this together. We're putting this together because we need to value our officers and our colleagues. And there's a whole every county in the country has a university that's offering degrees to cops, but they're not it's not being advertised well. It's forces are kind of playing lip service to it. They're encouraging officers to do it themselves. It shouldn't be like that. Someone needs to take a step forward and bring it all together. And I kind of see where that's the Federation's role in doing that. But I think really moving forward, we need to be having conversations with the forces, with the Home Office, and saying this is something you need to be doing. It shouldn't be for their representative organisations to try and pull these things together. If you're serious about changing the way the policing model works in this country, then you need to do something about it.
Sean, I suppose you've got a view on that as well, the regards to the responsibility of the organisation to be developing its staff, especially around their own well-being. You feel more comfortable doing a job if you know how to do it. So with regards to that, Sean, what's your opinion?
I personally think the onus should be on the forces to equip the staff to deliver the service. At the end of the day, I know we're talking about cops, but really this is about the service the members of the public get. And if they want the best service, then they should be educated to and recognised for the level that they're working at. And I think we're failing in policing, and if we want to move forward, then it has to be professionalised. And one of those roads to professionalisation is about taking responsibility for the education of the officers. Again, you listen to Andy Marsh this morning, he was saying that those officers who've been through the degree programme tend to have a wider outlook about what policing is. And I go back to, I was listening to Stop Search and the implications for Stop Search when I joined the job in '85, and we're still discussing the exact same issues, and we haven't learned from it. And I think Paul mentioned it this morning, every time it's carted out, we've come a long way, we've a long way to go. And I think education is how we're going to do that. And I think HE's got a role to play in that, both as educators and as research.
Yeah, thank you. Paul, I'm going to come back to you. There was a comment made by Andy Marsh this morning, and he linked accreditation, he linked skills, he linked them specifically to pay, which I presume is quite concerning. Do you think there's any evidence that that skill level, that number of accreditation will be linked to pay, has been linked to pay? Do you think it's a threat for the future?
You go back to 2011 when Mr. Windsor wrote his report on policing. He compared police officers with legal professionals, with the medical profession, and with the clergy. You know, and it made it quite clear. Even Tom Windsor made it clear that you know, the level that we're working at, we should be trained to that level, and we should be paid to that level. That was back in 2011. We've still got a long way to go. You know, the training is improving. The work with, you know, people are doing, the courses are doing with higher education providers. It's really like they're going in the right direction, albeit slowly. But, you know, if we're professionalising officers, if officers are taking it on themselves to get qualified, and they get then it's for the federation then to take that forward to the government and say, look at the level our cops are working at. Look at the improvements we've made. Look at where we were. Look at where we are now. You need to reflect that in the pay and stop penny pinching and taking pensions away from us and everything else. It should be the other way around. And you only have to look at other countries and the amount they invest in their forces. Like I spoke about Deputy Chief Carlos Ortiz from NYPD, who's going to talk on the 19th. The amount of money New York police cops get paid compared to cops over here. I don't know. I don't know what level of training they get in New York, but I would argue it's on a par with ours. I would suggest ours is probably getting better than theirs, and yet our cops are being paid half the amount of money that they are. It's just not right. So.
Jim, you mentioned and you talked about having a blended approach to learning and how people learn, and I think that's one of the major issues within policing and police training, and its amalgamation with HE providers. What can be done to improve that, do you think? How can that be made more fluid? And is it a culture clash or is it a process clash?
Okay, so if you think about what Sir Andy said about the, I'm going to use the expression lessons learned, but some about what happened with the PEQF. There was obviously, he said it specifically, he didn't think it was a great idea to educate cops in that way. But then there was a political kind of dimension to that the apprenticeship levy came in. So that did bring more parties around the table, but arguably it wasn't done for the reasons that Paul is saying, and we've been talking about in terms of CPD. So, you know, in terms of that question, there was always going to be a culture clash, because if you are going to bring about a successful cultural change, it needs to be top down and bottom up, and it doesn't really matter which you know, researcher you go to around cultural change. The two things do need to blend together. So some universities were, again, we heard this morning, better at that than others. Some police forces were better at that than others. But after a point, the politics changed, number one. And number two, there was some evidence to say that the culture had kind of got in the way. Have I witnessed that personally? Yeah, I have. But there's also something, and I think, you know, as Sean was saying, you know, when you exit the organisation, Gary was saying, you exit the organisation, you've not got a warrant card anymore. So even though I've got, you know, the amount of experience in policing and academia, my view as a pracademic and dual practitioner was less value than a police trainer. So what you've got is the political will has changed. You've got the culture of policing, arguably sometimes quite arrogant in its approach to things. With cops, we know best. And then you've got that clash between higher education and policing in terms of, I know a lot about policing, but I'm not a cop and I'm not a police trainer. And a lot of that evidence is actually within the Home Office onboarding survey. The most recent bit and some really interesting data there says that cops who have joined through the PEQF programs are more satisfied with their outcome than people who joined through the previous IPLDP process. So, you know, there isn't an easy answer to that. But what I'm saying is that a lot of things all happened in such a short space of time. Add in the artificial recruitment process, which, you know, again, throwing some academia here, it led to perverse consequences in gaming. Gaming means cheating on the figures, so pretty much people were sometimes employed in the wrong way. Adding COVID as well, well, let's be honest, you know, policing wasn't supported in the way that other public sectors were supported, and it was almost the perfect storm. So I'm not surprised that we've ended up with the outcome that we've got. But what I will say is, and again, it was positive for me to hear it directly from Andy Marsh this morning, that this isn't the end of the journey. So maybe we have got to point some lessons learned. And I think it's also incumbent upon us as university. Okay, where did we go wrong? What can we be doing more? So I think the future is a blended, more RPEL-led approach. And it's for universities to work with the service and with the Federation and with the MPCC and all of those interested parties, those stakeholders. So what is the best level of education for cops so they can deliver the best possible service to the public? And if we all can collaborate in that way, and actually, you know, Gary, me and Sean here work for 3 separate organisations, but we can agree on most things. Yeah, you know, we know the higher education sector's in a very bad state, not directly through policing, but you know, that's the way forward. This level of collaboration, talking about things, maybe stirring some things sometimes to get people to think in a different way. That's the future.
Gary, your thoughts?
Similar. That you've got to be pragmatic about it, because the CPD cannot take over the daily business. So while we're all cognizant of like abstractions from the workplace, so it's got to be effective. For me, it's got to really be effective because to get the best out of it, but we've got to be realistic about it as well. And yeah, it'll be fantastic if, and I agree wholeheartedly with Paul, that should be investment in people, very much like how I see it, the people come from the military get enhanced learning credits when they come on. They can use it even when they leave the job, even when they leave, I think for about 3 years or something, maybe a bit more afterwards. But I think it's got to be effective. And for me, what we've talked about, all of us today, is the applied nature of what they're doing. So it's not something like, oh, well, you're never going to use it. The CPD is what they're doing on a daily basis. And as you were saying, Paul, it's annoying because it's enhancing the reputation of the force, because they feed back in. All of everybody will feed back in, because I know it from discussions, and I know personally what to do. The students, as they are students when they come to higher education, where they feed it back in. And I was talking to a lad the other day who's fed some really important stuff back into the force, and it could affect the reputation of the force if they don't do something about it. But they've paid for it themselves. So I just think we'll just keep pushing, everybody keep pushing the importance of CPD. Because, and I think, and I understand why, all the work that's been going on with apprenticeships to all the new starters, but the amount of people who are currently enrolled, they get forgotten about. And what happens is, if you don't get them up to speed, they impact on the new starters, don't they? Yeah. So, and it's a massive a task to try and join up, but I think it could be done if the will's there.
And that was a lesson that wasn't learned from the NHS when they brought in Project 2000, and the same with the paramedics. So, am I right there, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not cited enough on that, to be honest, but I can imagine it being happening. It's very. We've had some people on the masters doing some work in 3 separate forces about the direct entry detectives, and every one of them's come back and said the organisation wasn't ready for them. So the people like what thought a great idea, they bring them in, but the supervisors don't understand the process enough. So it's never going to be as effective because it was never joined up. So I would imagine that was a similar thing with that.
Paul, I'll say that directly to you then with regards to that specialism, because we're talking about specialisms, and a lot of qualifications that are offered by HEIs are specialisms, which are open to not just police officers, but the public as well. That opens the door for direct entry. surely into specialist functions as a police officer. Does it work?
It works. It doesn't work as well as it could do. I think just turning back to your point that you raised, the supervisors on back in the police station weren't expecting these people. Well, that's because no one's invested in those people. You've got the vast majority of people are outside their probation. They're the ones imparting their knowledge and experience on the new recruits, new joiners who are coming in with degrees or doing degrees, and yet the people who are giving all that experience and knowledge and haven't been invested in themselves, and it's created almost like a division of the haves and have-nots within policing, and it's led to a lot of people arguing that degrees in policing is irrelevant, and it's not irrelevant. I've said all along it's not necessary, but if you're working to that level, if you've invested in all that time and energy and training and experience, why you deserve a degree? And it's forces to give that, to make that available. But you're right, having a degree, having that investment, having that broader way of thinking, it does open doors. It does lead on to specialists. You look at police now, they've been asked to directly employ people and train them to go directly into counter-terrorism. That's not an avenue that's available to other people. It's because they've invested and they're training them in a specific way, so they're becoming specialists. And I think that's probably how the future of policing is going to look. We're going to recruit people to be specialists in certain areas, whether that's IT or whether that's fraud or neighbourhood policing. It's kind of changing, and it's changing because of the way officers need to be educated. We can't have officers, I don't think, anymore that are jack of all trades, master of none. It's got to change. It's become so complex. You couldn't be a master of all that complexity. You need to hone your skills into certain specific areas of policing, and I think that's probably how the future is going to pan out, I think.
Which may fundamentally change the office of constable and the thought process around omni-competence. And with regards to that, coming towards the end, just one really practical question for people considering undertaking qualifications with a HEI. Paul, you're doing one, you're being assessed. You two assess people. One of the things that scares a lot of candidates from entering HEI is that word dissertation, 10,000 words. It's evidence-based research project. It's that. How realistic is it for a workforce that's working to be able to achieve that? And is that the only assessment methods that are open for people at the moment? Jim first.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I put myself forward for as an example. I had to do an academic interview with a great guy, Professor John Bennington from the University of Warwick, and he accepted me onto the course. Great. He said, "But you're going to be stretched, Jim." And I thought, too thick. That's what he means. Actually, and Paul alluded to earlier, it's not about not understanding stuff, it's writing it. And once you get used to kind of writing in an academic format, actually doing a dissertation, I enjoyed the reading and the learning from that, my own learning. I didn't know that, or that's why that works, that's why that doesn't work. And if you, with the support of your supervisor in the university, and focus on something that's really important to you, you will find that it's a cathartic experience. Yeah, you might be working all hours, God sends on it, but you want to do it because it becomes kind of a bit of a positive habit. And then, of course, at the end of that, you eventually send it all off and think, but in my case, I've got the bug. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So, that's my experience. We are there to support people. We're not there to make it difficult for them.
Gary?
I endorse all of that, and all what I do say to anybody who wants to go on this journey, go with the eyes wide open. And two things: consider personally how it's going to impact on you, and professionally how it's going to impact on you.
Okay, Sean.
Yeah, I've got to go with Jim here. It's if you choose a topic, that you're interested in, then you'll enjoy doing it. You've got to be realistic. If you've got a young family, you're just trying to learn the job at the same time. There's additional pressures. When I undertook my studies, my family are growing up, but it's a really enjoyable process. And the other thing is, even that's probably the wrong way to put it, but at level 6 for the initial dissertation, which would be about 6, 7, maybe 8,000 words, it's actually not a lot of words when you break it down into the 5 chapters or 6 chapters. and anybody can put together a committal file or an evidence file or whatever else, are doing similar activities to actually come to the same sort of conclusion, you know. And there are pressures, don't get me wrong, but they can be very enjoyable if you do it in the right way.
Thank you. Paul, I'll come to you, because people will be thinking they're a group of academics. They would say that, wouldn't they? You're the student. What's your view?
I just want to talk about, I'm doing my dissertation. I'm starting it very shortly. I've done a bit of research already, but I've represented a lot of officers who've written abhorrent things on Facebook and WhatsApp and things like that. And it's always bothered me. I think, why on earth are you doing that? You know, and I think there's a tangible link between the closure of police stations, the closure of canteens, the lack of social space that officers have to vent from the stresses of everyday policing. And my theory is, which is what I'm going to research for the dissertation, is that by taking away those opportunities for officers, they're turning to social media and writing things down that ordinarily might have been said in the pub or over a breakfast or something like that. I'm not justifying the behaviour, I'm just trying to work out why it's happening. And it fascinates me, and that's what enthuses me to do my dissertation. What I'm terrified about is how I write that dissertation and make it written in such a way that people are assessing it, and it's in the academic way of doing it. But that's where the university comes in to support you. And I have to be honest with you, that's the fear I've had all the way through doing my degree, is not being able to write things in the way that it's expected of you in the university. But I get support all the time with that. And you can show your dissertation in periods, every month, and they'll correct you where you're going wrong. So it's not. I don't necessarily need to have that fear anymore. But the important thing, as Sean just said, is having that enthusiasm and the interest in the subject. And I think the mistake I made before was doing a degree in useless studies at a useless university and something I just wasn't interested in. I had no enthusiasm. This is the work that I do every day. I'm interested in it, and it's what I want to progress with. And I think that's what cops need to carry them through these courses. That's what doesn't make it easy. It makes it interesting.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, that's the end of the panel discussion. So
yes, we're finished for the day. Like I said before, please do give your comments, feedback to us. Hopefully we can do more of these kind of seminars. I'll be particularly interested if you like the way we did it with the cameras, or whether you just want us to sit in our bedrooms and sit behind laptops or not. I thought this looked a little bit more professional, but thank you ever so much for everyone for joining. Thank you.